Hello and welcome back to the Raspberry 8 podcast. Today I'm joined by Pete Irvin. Pete is a super old school UK MMA and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu guy based out of the Northeast. He's based in Newcastle and really one of the pioneering guys for MMA and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu in that area. He was out living in Brazil, training jiu-jitsu in the early 2000s, so super early. So a really interesting time to be out there training in Brazil. Not very many people were doing that at all. He also has had a very successful pro MMA career himself and is now a coach and owner of his own gym. It was great to sit down and chat to Pete, someone I've known for a really long time, or known of for a really long time, and it was good to finally sit down and chat to him. He talks about his time in Brazil, how he got into martial arts, and a lot of his interesting takes on the modern mixed martial arts scene. I really enjoyed recording this one, and I hope you guys enjoy listening. Check it out. Firstly, Pete, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an honour being on the list with all the names on this podcast.
Well, I feel like you need to be on this podcast because for exactly that reason, you know, I've had the pleasure of speaking to so many really early guys in the UK MMA and grappling scene and pioneers in the sport in the UK especially, and I could not, that list is certainly not complete without you.
Oh, thanks, that's very flattering.
So, you know, with that being said, I say let's just get straight into this. You were super early into martial arts, you know, the modern martial arts stuff, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA in the UK. How did you first get into that?
Well, you know, normally I tell people like, just the typical story. I lived in a rough bit of town. I was a punk rocker, so I brought a lot of attention to myself. So I was getting into fights and I wasn't coming off very well, and so I just wanted to train in the same way that everybody else wants to be handy, but there wasn't really the sport of mixed martial arts around at the time, so I just wanted to train just martial arts, and I just kind of fell into like the early scene just by fluke. But I think actually the real reason is a little that what I wanted to pursue like a career as a prize fighter. I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to be an elite soldier ever since being a kid. You know, my grandfather had served in the Durham Light Infantry, and he was in the second wave of D-Day.
Oh wow!
And you know, he was a brave guy, and he survived the war, but he didn't survive until I never met him. But like, obviously, we grew up with this sort of mythologized kind of version of you know, we're the good guys. And I thought the idea of being an elite soldier, that was it for me. And do you remember there was a series called The World at War?
Yeah.
It was a wonderful series. It's really stood up the test of time. But it was one of the first sort of kind of honest versions where you started to look and go, oh God, it's not as simple as goodies versus baddies. We're not strictly the good guys. And then this was around the time after the Iraq War, which of course, as a child, I was thinking, we are the good guys, you know. And I started seeing the guys coming back, and obviously we didn't know what PTSD was and stuff. I didn't have an appreciation of this. And I started looking at boys coming back from my town and thinking, these guys aren't well. There's something wrong. And as I started to mature and become more politically aware, I realized, Christ, I can't do this. You know, like I wanted to be elite in some sense, but I thought I don't want to die, and I don't want to kill for these bastards. And it left me completely lost. I ended up going completely opposite direction, and I didn't live a good life. But I became kind of sort of more rebellious and anti-authoritarian, but it left me lost. You know, because I'd fixated on this idea since being a kid that I was going to be an elite soldier, and then prize fighting seemed to offer some way that I could recapture that I could impose this discipline on myself to be in some sense elite.
Yeah, it's like it's that warrior archetype, right? But but expressed in a far more controlled. You don't actually have to kill anyone. You don't have to put your life really in danger, but you can still get out some of that, what is innate in many men, which is that desire to kind of fulfill that warrior path.
Yeah. I was super into that kind of narrative when I was young. It's very appealing to young men. now I've changed my perspective a little bit. But
yeah, but have you changed your perspective as how it relates to you at this stage in your life, or have you changed your perspective of how you believe someone of any age should relate to that idea?
Oh, well, both. But in terms of the sport of mixed martial arts, I'm growing increasingly sour on it. I've always had very conflicted feelings about fighting. For myself and for encouraging other people to do it. For myself, I didn't care because I wanted to die. I wanted to die in the ring. And then when I'm there as a coach now, especially now that I'm a little bit older, I think like, Christ, the last thing I want is for something bad to happen to these guys, because I'm the coach. It's going to be me who has to phone mum and dad. Yeah, I don't know how I could live with it. And but as an athlete, I completely accepted that risk. I kind of almost exaggerated that risk to myself. It's very unlikely that anybody's going to die in a mixed martial arts contest. I mean, but the possibility is always there. And in this way, we kind of play with, the life and death struggle. Can make a game out of it and repeat it. But for other people, I'm certainly a lot less cavalier about it, and I'm finding it harder and harder to work corners and encourage people to do this. Yeah, it's sending me around the bend, to be honest. I think I'm going to have to find some other occupation. But jiu-jitsu, this is why I like jiu-jitsu as well, because I feel okay about telling anyone go and compete.
Yeah,
the risks are not they're not too much to reconcile with. Where mixed martial arts, not just for the physical danger, but for the
brain.
Yeah, the physical danger to the brain and the rest of the body. Yeah, but the career prospects. Yeah, it's I can't justify encouraging people to go down this path anymore. So yeah, it's a shame the way the sport's ended up.
That's really fascinating, and I appreciate you being so open and honest about that. It's something that I really also feel. Obviously, I got into jiu-jitsu with the intention of getting into MMA, and I feel grateful that I never did. That by the time it got to the stage of, okay, you're 18 now, 19, you've been training jiu-jitsu for a few years, now would be the time to start getting some striking in. By that point, I was so enamored with jiu-jitsu that I had no desire to take time away from that to train striking. And now I'm at the stage where I would never do MMA. And actually working for Cage Warriors has solidified that position for me, because you see the reality, and I'm sure that's a perspective that you have even more so as a coach, where most people who watch MMA, you see, firstly, you're watching the result of all the hard work. You're watching what is being presented behind the camera or in front of the camera, and a lot of the time you're seeing it at the absolute highest level. And what you're missing is the iceberg, right? You're seeing 10% of it, and 90% underneath is brutal.
A lot of it's brutal, and a lot of it's just fucking boring as well. like Owen was saying on the last time, like living the elite lifestyle. Yeah. You get what, 15 minutes of massive excitement tops, and then for weeks and weeks of just drudgery.
Yeah.
Do you ever regret not just having one or two bouts? Do you feel like you missed out on something?
I don't think so. I really don't. There's a part of me maybe that wishes that I did one or two, and there's people out there who still think, yeah, but you can do it. 6 months of stand up, you shoot a takedown. I'm going to be able to out grapple most people, but I just have no desire to get punched in the head. To be honest with you, I really don't. Like the whole concept of it. I'm very happy to just say, I don't want to be punched in the head. I've got no bravado about, getting kicked in the face or kicked in the body or in the leg or getting elbowed in the head or whatever. I've got no desire to do it, and I'm quite happy to just roll around and choke people instead.
That's good. That's a good thing. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting one. Do you think that, I mean, the sport of MMA, especially in the UK, has become a lot safer? There's a lot more testing. We've got like safe MMA in place, and there's a lot of stuff where I feel like the guys at the top of the sport are really trying to make sure that the sport can be as safe as possible. But ultimately, it's mixed martial arts. It's never going to be fully safe.
Yeah. There's no two ways around it. It's not good for you. But what's the alternative? I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd chosen something else. And I've had a lot of times where I've thought, man, did I waste my life? I didn't waste my life as in I just sat there and played PlayStation or went to the bookies or went to the pub. Not that kind of waste. But you make this moral calculation. Like every day you go to bed and say, was the world better because I was in it? Was it worse because I was in it, or is the world indifferent? So you have this kind of like karmic bank balance, and a lot of the time, I think even on my best days in MMA, where I really felt that I'd achieved something, I thought, well, that bank balance was at best neutral, and maybe it was negative. One thing I can have another day when all I did was like make some packed lunches and clean some clothes and read some bedtime stories. I thought, okay, well, the world was better for somebody else because I was in it that day, and it's nothing glamorous, but I think what else could I have done? I mean, I know that I couldn't have actually been a doctor. I didn't have the economic means. But everybody, this meme. It takes the same amount of time to become a doctor as it does to earn this belt. Which is obviously good. It's the worst case of false equivalence. But it's not, there's something there. And there's something that it's kind of a polemic statement, isn't it? But I could imagine what I could have done with my life if I'd been a doctor. And I think I have to make this comparison. Did I put my energies in the right place?
Do you not think that you have? I feel like as a coach, maybe not as a fighter, but as a coach, which you are now, and you've got a gym here, and you've got lots of guys, and you do work with, and something that I want to talk about more later, with like work with refugees who have come over and stuff like that. Do you not feel that coaching is putting money into that karmic balance?
I hope so. I try to make it like that. I try to. But, like with the coaching thing, you give me a lot of flattery at the beginning here on the introduction, which I really appreciate. But I got a good reputation early on, just purely because I knew things that other people didn't know. I had access to elite environments that other people hadn't had yet. And I had access to information that other people hadn't had yet. There's not the YouTube explosion. There wasn't so many schools around. So I got this reputation as being a good coach. But really, actually, I'm not a bad teacher. I'm not a very good coach because I struggle to relate to people. Like on the personal aspect, that is the coaching part above teaching. I really find it hard. There's only a handful of people that I can really understand and relate to because they're fanatical. Like they are like I was when I was their age. Guys like Harry and George. Like they're all in, and I get them. And they get me back. And with a lot of other people, I really struggle to relate. So I'm good at teaching, like we talked the other day about how you'd refine your process, and that this is a skill that can continue to improve. And I feel like that's something that I can continue to improve even as my body deteriorates. I can't produce the performance that I used to, but I can increase my knowledge and I can increase my ability to communicate that. But I don't have a good coaching skill. I don't have the ability to relate unless that person is just on my wavelength,
That's a really interesting concept there, which is you've made this differentiation between a teacher or an instructor and a coach. And that differentiation is that ability to relate on a deeper level with the person that you're working with.
Yeah. This, I mean, you can educate yourself to some extent about this. There's ways to figure out what approach to take with an individual athlete. Or you can just have a program that people conform to or don't. This is also like a possible thing. You take like Iowa style wrestling. You take like this. Oh God, who was the guy? There was a guy who went to Iowa, didn't do well in the Iowa program there. Went to another college and was absolutely flying because the all-out Iowa method just didn't suit his wrestling style. But if you go to Iowa, that's what you're going to get. There's a local gym around here, a really great amateur boxing gym called Bertley, and there's a Bertley method. Like there's hallmarks of a Bertley boxer, and it's not like, it sounds reductive to sort of go, they just make all the guys box the same way, which is not precisely the case because they get excellent results. But only a certain type of person can survive in that program.
Yeah.
And that requires them to box a particular way and think a particular way and behave a particular way. And that works for them. They get a lot of great results about that. But other guys have to go to another gym because they don't conform to that methodology. Some coaches do a great job of like knowing how to talk to one another. One of my friends who was from Sheffield, he used to box as an amateur when he was young. Him and his brother, like typical brothers, born in the same place, lived in the same household, completely different characters. And they both boxed on the same night, and they both had a bad first round. So his brother goes out and boxes, and the coach gets up, the same coach, and says to his brother, if you box like that in this second round, I'm going to walk away from the corner because you're embarrassing me. And the kid goes, I'll show you. Goes out and blitzes it, puts the kid away in the second round. The same thing happens to my friend, his brother, and he comes back to the corner deflated. But he's got a completely different mentality. And the coach knows him and he says, okay, son, you've taken his best punches. Couldn't put you down, could he? Okay, now we're through the first round. You just get out there and you show me what you've got. I know you can do it, son. And he goes out and fights superbly. If he'd flipped the approaches, it would have had disastrous results. So there's an excellent coach who knew how to communicate with his athlete. Me, I never really had that. I just could never quite relate to people who didn't think like me. So I got a reputation as a good coach early on, just purely by access to information. And then I would attract the best talent because some of the best talent was already there. And so I had this part, I think there was a couple of years there where, as a fighter and as a coach, it was almost a 100% win ratio. It was almost 100%. If I'm struggling to remember any defeats, and I thought, God, man, I'm good at this. Yeah, I'm really good. But it wasn't me. It was just that I had that environment that attracted all of the best people. And of course we were winning. And it was easy to coach those guys because they had big pieces missing from the game because of access to information that I'd had. So then I could just go, look, you just need to know this set of moves. Easy. I thought I was being a good coach. But really, actually, I just said, well, if you don't believe me, I can prove it because I'm, bigger, stronger, faster. And and then actually what it turned out was that everybody else caught up very, very quickly. And turned out my coaching wasn't particularly good at all. It was just that I'd had access to information that was sort of in some sense secret. So then I had to improve a lot. But still people people sort of give me compliments that knew me back in the day and go, oh wow, you're like an encyclopedia of jiu-jitsu. And I think, I know I've seen what you're doing and it's better. I didn't know that. I just knew things that other people didn't have back in the day. Or maybe cottoned on to a couple of things that are very obvious now, like cage wrestling. I used to wrestle with Abdul Muhammad and Hassan Moradi. And they would just absolutely destroy me. They were like really good wrestlers and good MMA wrestlers too, which is again a slightly different skill. But like, man, I just couldn't stay on my feet for a minute with those guys. But when we went on the fence, they'd had generations of experience and that had tuition in this. And so if we stand bent over and I wrestle with them, man, I couldn't stay on my feet and there was no way I could get them down. But on the fence, I'm not saying I could get them down, but I could stay up on my feet for that little bit longer. And I thought, okay, this is a different set of skills. And so then I started to develop just a little system, which is primitive by today's standards, but at the time that was like, if not revolutionary, it was sort of on the cutting edge for the region at least. But now that's everybody caught up and surpassed that very quickly. So you just have to continually try to look and address things. And
that's a very honest and open approach and a review in yourself. But I have a feeling you might be being a little bit too humble there in some regards. You're talking about, yes, maybe you went and you got information that a lot of people in the area didn't have access to, but as you just said there, you're also you're not simply taking that information and then passing it back on. You're digesting it and adjusting it and making changes and developing it and growing it a little bit yourself. Even if eventually the rest of the area and the country would catch up, that's still work that you've put in to make those adjustments. Yeah,
well, there's an interesting thing when you think about technique that it's a time for re-examining like notions of intellectual property. If you see like the technology has radically changed the way that people view intellectual property, and how do you claim a technique? There's many people have techniques named after them. everybody's got no bladder, right? How many bladders is there? So you associate it with this person, or the De La Riva God would be one of the most famous ones. That people associate this with De La Riva,
or the like Tarika Platas. That is a really good example. Yeah.
But of course, the Tarika Plata, Russian sambists have been doing a version of this, possibly not as refined, but they've been doing a version of this for forever. We know this. The De La Riva God. Well, of course, it's like De La Riva himself has said, I don't play this god a whole great deal because I've got quite short legs, so it doesn't suit a lot of the time. But it just so happened that his name got attached to this position, so you tend to think of it as, but of course, he can't invent this on his own. You need at least one other person there to invent a position, right? So of course, all of these positions were, there in the Carlson Gracie gym, like people developing these things. Like Creso, like everybody said to me, like, oh, ask Creso about his sitting god, his butterfly god. He doesn't call it the butterfly god; he calls it the seated god or sitting god. And he's like, oh no, nothing special. I was just one of the first guys to do it. So somebody asked him at a seminar once. This is my teacher, Creso de Souza, and somebody asked him, so like, how did you create these incredible positions? And he said, I never created anything. I just simply observed what works. I thought it was a very powerful statement, and it's sort of very humble, but he never had this desire to put his name onto a position because, well, it wasn't really me. It was a combination of all these people. So the intellectual property of jiu-jitsu or whatever is very hard. It's very hard to pin down.
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic. That I think you're right. I don't think anyone can really claim that they invented something. Whenever I teach seminars, I never use the word invented. I'll say I came up with this.
Yeah.
Which implies that I developed it without any external input. However, I'm under no illusion that I'm the first person to ever do this. And I remember, and I sometimes tell the story of when I first had this epiphany, which was, I was probably a blue belt at the time, so we're talking a long time ago now. And I came up, I thought I invented this double arm bar from the mount. So I get the mount position. I was like quite flexible in the hips. And basically I'd be sitting on the chest, like double overhooks on the arms, both feet over the face, arm bar in both arms at the same time. I said, I've invented this sick double arm bar from the mount. And the next week I walk into W.H. Smith, and on the cover of Martial Arts Illustrated is Nino Shembri doing my technique. And I realized that every technique you think you invented probably was done by accident by a Brazilian kid 20 years ago.
Yeah, of course.
There's only so many ways to move the human body, and people can develop. And when techniques are named after people, I think it's a nice way of honoring the impact and influence that someone has had on the sport and specifically on a position. So, for example, I know it's not named after him, but like the half guard and Gordo, or the Kimura and stuff like this. Like these are techniques that have the terminology has moved into the sort of colloquial language of grappling, and just a little mark there, but they didn't invent it.
It's an interesting one. Initially, oddly, the Brazilians only gave names to positions after Japanese.
Yeah.
There was no Brazilians taking the names for themselves. Even the De La Riva God was not marketed as such by De La
called
Riva.
It the Jelly God, I think.
Yeah. Somebody else called it the De La Riva God and gifted it to him, which is kind of the way it should be. It's like giving yourself a nickname, right? Like it's not cool. You do it for yourself. It's got to be, yeah. So it was only like Ezekiel, Kimura, etc. They're all named after judo players.
Yeah.
Of course, Ezekiel wasn't Japanese, but he was a judoka.
And like the Americana was named after an American guy, I believe.
I've heard a couple of different versions of this history. Yeah. But apparently saw an American wrestler. I forget the name. I should. Yeah. But
he's probably kicking himself, going, I could have had it named after my name, but instead they just named it after the country I'm from.
That's it, the American. That's it. Me, I was the gringo for all the time I was there. Nobody knew my name. It was just gringo. I get the German, Allemand, because I had blonde hair.
Yeah.
So that was it. Yeah, Brazilian nicknames. Oh man, Brazilian nicknames are funny. Oh, I love them.
Go on. What's some of the good? I've had this conversation so many times on the podcast of people saying their favorite Brazilian nicknames, because some of them are. They're generally very insulting.
Yeah.
Go on, some of your favorites.
Oh, what was it? It was on your podcast. The guy called Benjus.
Yeah,
Oh,
Sharimir.
yeah.
Did you know Sharimir?
No. I just thought that was the funniest nickname. But like, normally they're just descriptive, like big nose, baldy, all this kind of stuff. Napao and.
But it sounds like a bit. It's a bit more poetic when said in Portuguese.
Yeah, but like even the ones that are cool. Like I heard this story. I don't know if this is true or not. But Shogun, like you think Shogun. Okay, there's a cool nickname because he's fighting in Japan and stuff like that. Yeah. Apparently. Everybody else had like an atama and stuff like that, and Shogun came with like a second-hand judo gi that didn't fit properly, and it was Shogun brand. It's like, so his nickname actually means shit gi. I don't know if this is true. Yeah,
I like that. I like that a lot. Since we're talking about it a little bit, this is a big thing that I wanted to chat to you about, which was your time in Brazil. You move into Brazil. You were trained in Brazil super early. Before we get onto that, how did you first get into sort of mixed martial arts, or what year was it? Do you remember that you first got into fighting?
So, well, actually, I started with traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. And there was a chap called Jamie Driscoll. It was he gave me a job, and I couldn't find work because I was a shitbag basically. I was wasting my life. And the guy gave me a chance, gave me a job, and he had a traditional jiu-jitsu club.
Do you know how old you were at this point?
I was already 20 years old.
Okay.
So I didn't have any sports background. I'd stopped training a few years beforehand, and I missed that really important phase of athletic development. So I was useless when I got on there. I couldn't do 10 push-ups. I couldn't do 10 sit-ups. It was pathetic. So they made me go on the beginner's mat for a long time. So I always try to reinforce this to the guys, when I'm trying to make them do solo drills, and you can see them like going like, let's just, I'll just do a couple of reps and then get to the back of the queue and then just show me some techniques. This is so important
stuff. Yeah. Learning how to move.
Yeah. This is one of the things that like jiu-jitsu really lacks fundamental, where like in this sense, judo is it's far superior to the methodology of physical development.
Yes.
And it's due to the constraint of having so many options in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
In judo, there are many things to know, but you can see people like have a handful of skills, or they kind of have branches of particular throws, where in jiu-jitsu it's just
it's endless.
Yeah. I mean, like a judo fighter might be attracted to a particular throw to begin with, and then they change the style a little bit or whatever. But you kind of have these families of throws that people can identify quite rapidly what they are. When I'm sure every jiu-jitsu person has experienced like big phases where they've gone from being a guard player to being a top player, or vice versa. And there's so many options. It's very, very hard to know where to put your attention. But physical development is really lacking in jiu-jitsu, and in a formal way anyway. So when you see like judo fighters, especially ones that have come from being really young, they build these really, really robust bodies. Same with wrestlers, and jiu-jitsu people often don't. They can quite easily like go through years of training and still not have the kind of physicality that's really necessary to be a competitive athlete. So I can't remember what my initial point was. Oh, we were talking about how I started. I ended up getting sidetracked again.
That's all right.
Yeah. So
we love a good sidetrack.
So I began with this, and I was hopeless, but I would see the black belts doing these really dynamic judo style throws, and I really, really wanted to get involved with this, but they made me do the fundamentals, and I'm so glad that they did. Really the problem with this was that there was no competitive format, and I was just dying to prove myself, because I was insecure, so I wanted to prove to myself, but I wanted other people to see me, you know what I mean? It wasn't enough to do it in the gym. I had to get on a show and make sure everybody knew that I was a brave guy, and then don't mess with me.
So you wanted to, you had this idea of competing in prize fighting, before you did any sort of training. So you started martial arts with the intention of fighting.
And
was there even was there even MMA at that point?
There was some shows going on. I only discovered
that you were aware of, or
I only discovered this a little bit later. Okay. Actually, interestingly, like I trained judo here for a little while. I trained some judo in Brazil, but I trained judo here a little while with there's a guy called Sensei Steve Megan, who's or like a real old school guy. So all those guys trained at the Kodokan. They're like military guys. And he was really, really tough. And many years before, not knowing that this was happening in Brazil, he went and trained some Thai boxing at Sotanical Gym with my coach Barry Norman, and with the intention that they were going to challenge other martial arts, and they went and did this. They put out challenge matches to karate schools and whoever else, whoever they take us, and basically did Vale Tudo fights. It's just that they never did it in a commercial way. But actually they had this idea just the same as they had in Brazil, and I'm sure this happened all over the world.
Guys.
Judo guys, yeah. And
because to my knowledge, the idea of doing challenge matches was frowned upon by judo.
Yeah. I'm not sure how the sort of the authorities thought about this.
Yeah.
Maybe I've said something that I shouldn't have said. Yeah, but
statute of limitations.
Yeah. But this happened. They were real tough guys. They wanted to prove that their martial art was effective. They also realized that striking was going to be a necessary thing, even if it was just to understand seeing kicks and punches coming at them in order to deal with from a good kicker and puncher. So they might not have ever even intended to become excellent Thai boxers, but they had the right idea.
Yeah.
But they just never pursued it in a commercial way. Oh, I get sidetracked again. Sorry.
That's right. No. Do you know what? This is how we like to do the podcast, is we look at your journey, but then we get off on these sidetracks, and that's when a lot of the gems come up, like stuff like that. It's just my job to steer you back in when you're at the end of that road. So you've started Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. With the intention of doing some sort of competitive combat, but not really with an idea of what exactly it is you want to do. Yeah.
I think probably just in the same way that everybody's notions are formed as a kid by Van Damme's kickboxer and Bloodsport, and Enter the Dragon or whatever else. I just thought I just want to fight people and wanted to be seen fighting people. I wanted people to know. So I forget even how I managed to meet them, but there was a bunch of guys at the AFC, John Atkins Advanced Fighting Centre. So John was one of those original guys. Like, I think his background had been originally in ninjutsu, but he was like a real practical martial artist. He was a doorman, so there was no fantasy about his ninjutsu. It wasn't pretending you're invisible and letting off smoke bombs. It was grappling was what he was doing. Grappling against weapons. So
really?
I think normally now, if you said to somebody ninjutsu, they'd think, it's some goofy nerdy thing. Not John's ninjutsu. No.
Wow.
No, they were for real, because he was really having to deal with people who were bringing bats and knives and things like that. He was a real old school tough guy. And then he wound up in with Jeff Thompson. And of course, they had the Animal Day stuff, which was the nascence of, MMA challenge style fighting. And so he was doing that way back in the day. He got in touch with the Machados, went over to the USA and trained with the Machados. So John was really the guy who kind of invented MMA. They called it cross training, but essentially we're just doing some wrestling, some boxing, some jiu-jitsu and putting it all together. So there was a group of guys there who were fighting.
Do you remember what year that was?
God, this must have been 2001, I'm guessing. It must have been 2001. And there was this guy called Gavin Bradley there. Gavin was a tough guy. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago.
That's okay. Take your time.
Sorry, I don't know. I hadn't thought about him for a little while, so.
I understand.
Yeah. But Gav was a tough guy. He fought Leo Remedios. He was one of them guys, he would fight anybody. Do you know what I mean? You know how we have some people who say, I'll fight anybody. But they go and they fall over for them. I'll get 200 quid to show my face and then fall over on the first punch. Gav would fight anybody. He'd put up a fight. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't the best fighter in the world, but he was like,
That's like an attribute you can't really.
Yeah.
You're born with it or you're not. True gameness, right? Yeah.
But he had these pictures, because of course we didn't have cameras and stuff back then, so he had these pictures developed where he'd been on some, I think it was what was it called? Ultimate Combat, one of those early shows. And I was like, wow, is this legal? And he was like, I don't know, nobody stopped us. I said, do you get money for it? I'm like, yeah. I was like, great, I could really use some money. Can you get me a fight? So I ended up fighting in County Durham somewhere on one of it was before, Peter McQueen's Total Combat. Yes. It was called Goshen Ryu Fighting Championships before that, and it was like, there's no way, if anybody had my skill level then, why are you even thinking about fighting here? You need to stay in the gym for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But so I I went there to this show, and it was in like a working man's club, back when you could smoke in working men's clubs.
Yeah.
So it was like...
You're like passing through the fog.
Yeah, you had to push your way through the crowd, you know. Because you know how you see the Gracies coming out, they did the Gracie train and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, oh, it's this cool camaraderie kind of thing. I said, no, that's just how you get through crowds in Brazil. So that you don't lose your friends, that you put your hands on the shoulder so you know if somebody gets pulled away from you and you can plow through a crowd.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what that was all about, yeah.
Really?
So, yeah.
I did not know that.
I thought it was just like a gimmick, you know.
Yeah.
But it was, that's how they do.
I love the idea that they just like, this is how we go in, and then everyone's like, this is the coolest thing ever. And they're like, oh, this is just what we're used to.
It's just how you get through a crowd, because there was no channels left, you know, in those early setups. So it stops people from standing on the athlete's foot when they're in their bare feet. So I went there like this, having to push my way through the crowd and getting beer spilled on me, and guys, cigarettes, just making this haze just at head height. So you get up there and you've got this cloud of smoke.
Yeah.
And I'd never been in a boxing ring before. And I'd seen this video of a boxer fall over between the ropes, like, and then make like a fool of himself. And I was just terrified. And I thought, like, oh no.
Getting into the ring? Or?
Getting into the ring. Yeah, he got in the ring and he tripped over the ropes twice. And I thought, like, oh God, this is going to be me. So I just sat and watched how everybody got into the ropes, because I'd never been in a ring before, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, right, okay, so you step through, you know, go underneath, right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pry the ropes apart and duck underneath, you know. So I was really, really focused on this, going out and just don't fall over. And I got in the ring, and Big Colin Sexton, you know, turns to me and goes, are you ready? And I was like, oh fuck no, I'm not ready at all. I was just thinking about not falling over. So I had my first fight, and like I got boxed all over, and they managed to take the guy down and control him on the floor. And
so you'd been doing some grappling training at that point?
Yeah, well, we were just learning off videos essentially. A
Really?
lot of it was just watching what guys were doing and then copying, and then we'd had some instruction from John and Lee at the Advanced Fighting Centre. But really, we were just completely winging it, and then just, you know, trying to figure out what an arm lock was from seeing a like grainy tape traded VHS. Was it Lars Besant? Do you remember Lars Besant from the Netherlands?
Yeah,
he used to send us all tapes, so we used to just buy them, and then we'd all get one each, and then swap them around. So yeah, it was really good fun. But yeah,
how'd that first fight go?
I thought I'd won, and then they raised the other guy's hand, and then I saw the judge. Right, he was at the gym a couple of weeks later. Sometime later anyway. He says, oh yeah, you know that fight? You actually won that one. I saw the video back and then realised you won. I was like, well, why didn't you give it to me at the time? He said, well, the table was underneath the ring, so as soon as it went on the floor, we didn't know what happened. So like, you know, you got punched a few times, so we gave it to the other guy. I'm like, well, thanks. Do you not think maybe you might have mentioned, like, I can't see, can we sit a bit higher up or something? Well, anyway, that's so.
But those early days, the judges must have not even really had any idea that grappling was going to be this big, useful thing. I mean, I guess you do. It's like way past UFC 1.
It was past UFC 1, yeah. But I mean, understanding any sort of nuance and who were the judges,
exactly,
I don't know. You know, it was all just it was all just kind of potluck, you know. But like, yeah, I remember those shows. Like the medic, he had the doctor, he had like a high-vis jacket with doctor written on the back in pen and like a stars and stripes bandana, and he's sitting on the desk here. Somebody gets choked out cold. I think it must be Ian Freeman comes over and goes, get in the ring, do your job, somebody is unconscious. And he goes, oh, and he gets up and wanders into the ring and kind of nudges the guy and goes, are you okay, mate? Like, Ian Freeman just goes, fuck off, and puts him in the recovery position, you know, gets his gum shield out. He's like, I thought, yeah, doctor written on the back of a...
It's not a good start.
Suggests you're not really a doctor, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, that was the early days.
So when did you first head out to Brazil?
Well, this was because I had a couple of fights, and then I realized I didn't know anything. I knew a little bit about some things, and I realized I needed a base. And at the time, it appeared that base was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now people would argue, you know, that what you want is an athletic base, wrestling, you know, generally speaking. But, you know, at the time, this was a good option for me. I just had a friend by chance, a Brazilian guy that I knew from the punk scene. And I said, hey, man, are you from Brazil? I've started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was like, oh, yeah, cool, I'm a blue belt. I was like, oh, wow, you know, that's awesome. Because a blue belt at the time was a really big deal.
Massive, yeah.
You know, it's still a big deal, actually. I shouldn't say this as if, but it was rare.
I mean, we can say this without diminishing the achievement of getting a blue belt, but it's just statistically. I mean, the first competition I ever did, they didn't even classify that it was a white belt division. it was just a division because there were so few blue belts.
Yeah.
It was basically a white belt division, and one blue belt shows up for the absolute. And when I used to say many years ago, I used to say it was like a black belt walking in today.
Yeah.
It's not even like a black belt walking in. It would be like a red belt walking into a room. It was so rare at that point.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that they were any better. It was just that there were so few blue belts that was akin to, at the very least, a couple of degrees on a black belt today.
Well, that's actually, I missed a little bit of the story because Dave Elliott had been working in London and he'd been trained by Mark Wilder. So when Dave Elliott came back to town, that was a revelation. It was like Hicks and Gracie was here. You know, I mean, the things he was a blue belt at the time, which was special at the time, but he wasn't just any blue belt. Dave was really special, amazingly talented guard player. Like his guard, I remember, like even then as a blue belt, his guard was like a black belt's guard, you know, like he just crushed your shoulders. He had this amazing squeeze between his legs. That's like, you know, it's a thing that you don't really cultivate from other sports. It's not really, you know, I mean, you can
that internal pressure on the legs,
like even like squatting and all this sort of like basic strength builders don't really quite accomplish this precise thing.
There's
Dave
one
just
sport.
seemed to have it. Oh, what?
Yeah, pole dancing. It's true, man.
Yeah.
Those women could hold themselves on a pole with just their legs. That's some serious.
That's where we need to recruit from.
Absolutely, 100%.
But yeah, I mean, maybe equestrian sports actually, and maybe
no, but you're
like
right. It's
motocross.
No, you're 100% right. Like that internal pressure that we get with the legs in jiu-jitsu, like of a good guard player or a good half guard player. I mean, I've never rolled with him, but I've heard stories of Eddie Bravo rolling, and all everyone ever says is his lockdown, his leg pressure is so tight. And you're right. There's not very many sports out there that develop that strength.
Yeah. So Dave was like this, but then I didn't have very much going on, and I got the opportunity to go to Brazil, you know. And then I never managed to get back together with Dave because when I came back, he was working in London again, and you know, then I was just doing MMA. I wasn't training the gi anymore, you know. But Dave was a very special, very influential player in the Northeast.
Yeah. He's someone I definitely like to have on the podcast in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got some really good stories. But yeah, my Brazilian friend Victor, he said, "Oh yeah, so I'm a blue belt with Grezio de Souza." And it was like, all right, cool. Who's Grezio? You know, I said, oh yeah, he's trained by Carlson Gracie. He's a Carlson Gracie black belt. He fought Dan Henderson. I said, fuck, he fought Dan Henderson. I was like, oh, that's amazing. This is the guy. I've got to meet him. And he came walking down the road. It just so happened that Victor had invited him over. He came walking down the road and he's tiny. He was like a featherweight. And I'm looking, I thought you said he fought Dan Henderson. He said, oh yeah. He showed me the video. Fucking double leg Dan Henderson, put him down, got the mount on him. It was this controversial fight, actually. It's an interesting story, this, because it was Dan Henderson's first MMA fight, you know, back when they were Raw. You remember Real American Wrestling?
Yeah.
And against the Brazilian team. And like Grezio had bulked up to like 80 kilos or something like this, and then Dan Henderson was obviously coming down and cutting weight, you know. So, but it was his first fight and it was Grezio's last fight. And Grezio double legs him, gets the mount, and then gets reversed off. You know, Dan Henderson throws down some punches and waves it off. You know. So like Grezio's like very upfront about this one. He says like, look, I'm not saying I won. I'm not even saying I was going to win. Could have lost, but I didn't lose. So I would like a rematch. Dan Henderson said, yeah, cool, yeah, fair enough, yeah, early stoppage, we'll have a rematch. He's training for the rematch. One of his students reaches up from underneath the mount in panic, sticks his thumb in his eye, and goes blind.
No.
It's like, that's it. So, of course, he didn't get the fight in Pride. You know, all of his teammates, of course, they all went off to Pride, and that was his opportunity shot because he could never pass the medical again. It was a real shame, you know. But yeah, he was really like a special fighter. So he'd wrestled for Brazil as well. So the kind of the jiu-jitsu that I learned was like more what you would see now in like a ADCC style. So when I actually came back and I started to see guys playing a more conventional kind of like open guard way. Well, I saw the first time I ever saw a double guard pull. I was at the Mundials. I was like, the fuck was that? Like,
I mean, to be fair, still to this day, when I say double guard pull, I think it's pretty bad. When you see a double guard pull and then they both stay on their arse, that does not look good. Yeah.
It's all. I've reviewed my opinions about guard pull, and it's like it's all in the game. It's just But it's it's an example of the sport splitting where like what I was really attracted, because my intention with training jiu-jitsu was specifically to get a base for MMA. I wanted to understand how to compete in a less injurious sport, you know. And so like the Guerrero style, where it was geared towards mixed martial arts competition, he had a nice phrase. What did he say again? So like, in the academy, we learn and practice the jiu-jitsu. On the competition mats, we test the jiu-jitsu. In the ring, we prove the jiu-jitsu. I thought, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah, and I think at that stage, even though we'd had UFC 1, 2, 3, like it was already established, I feel like jiu-jitsu, even to this day, I feel like jiu-jitsu still is proving itself at the highest level, you know, even when it's interesting because I don't feel like any other sport that comprises mixed martial arts feels that way. But when a jiu-jitsu guy wins a UFC belt, or the jiu-jitsu guy gets a big submission victory, I feel like they're still representing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it is nice when you see, like, you know, Jacare or Damian Maia or Gilbert Burns now is probably the best example of a guy who's a legit gi black belt, a world-class gi black belt, producing results in MMA. It's very nice to see, you know, but it's this thing with like saying, jiu-jitsu doesn't work anymore. Of course it's bullshit.
No one really says that, right?
Well, you know, it's more of a marketing thing. We say, I come from Sambo, so I'm going to talk shit about jiu-jitsu, get a headline or something like this. You know, but what it is true is that jiu-jitsu is not the best base. You know, statistically speaking, it's not the best base to produce results in modern MMA. Modern MMA, you know, and part of it is that just the way that the sport has evolved down the sport lines lends itself to different positions that either don't exist or don't function the same way once you introduce punches. You know. But it's the athletic qualities that it produces, the pacing that it produces, you know, doesn't lend itself the way that wrestling does.
Yeah.
But everybody's training jiu-jitsu. Or they don't have to even call it jiu-jitsu. They're just doing submission grappling. You know? But you know, of course they're doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You know, of course they are. You know? So of course, it's really, really hard to submit somebody, you know, in 5-minute rounds where like it might take you like 2 or 3 minutes to get the guy down. You know, of course, yeah. But why aren't people getting submitted all the time? Because everybody trains jiu-jitsu.
Of course.
You know? But the only thing that you can't say is, it's possibly true that as an athletic base, jiu-jitsu is not necessarily the best crossover. But you must have jiu-jitsu. You must train jiu-jitsu.
Well, I feel like jiu-jitsu, out of all of the martial arts that make up MMA, has arguably the worst culture of physical conditioning. In judo, it's really, really high. In wrestling, it's probably the highest of all of them. But even in boxing, conditioning, road work, bag work, skipping, there's a real culture. Whereas in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think it comes down to the marketing of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu when it first came out. The idea that the whole sport was sold on the smaller guy can beat the bigger guy. Why would we be in the gym working out? Even though they all did.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to this argument. But I'll give it an example. I overheard a couple of guys in the bathroom after a jiu-jitsu. I forget what it was. It was some like regional tournament, you know. And one of the guys says to his teammate, how did you do today? He said, I lost because I wasn't in shape. The guy wasn't better than me, but I just hadn't trained. You know, I wasn't in shape. And I thought, if I heard one of my guys say that, I would slap him around the ear. Like, I said, man, if you said the opposite and said, look, I came in real good shape, I made the weight, my diet was right, I trained as hard as I could train, and that guy was just technically better than me. That's okay, well done. There's nothing else you could have done. Yeah. But you knew when the tournament was. This was completely under your control. You knew when the tournament was. You could have got in shape, you know, for how many rounds you have to do in an average tournament? What?
2, 3, 4?
Yeah. Max 5 or 6 matches. Yeah. You're like, who can't get in shape for that? You know, so this was unforgivable to me. If any one of my athletes said that, I would just slap them around the ear. You know, but, I mean, obviously I wouldn't really. I'm just saying that.
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
So you meet up with this jiu-jitsu guy, and then this is in the UK or this is in Brazil?
I met him in the UK. He happened to be visiting Newcastle. It was just a pure fluke. You know, it was just a pure chance. You know, so I said the same shit they probably heard all the time, saying like, "Oh, it's my dream to be a fighter, and I want to come to Brazil and do it." And he said, "Yeah, cool. Yeah, come and train." You know, so I just went. I didn't have anything at all here. I packed my bags. You know, all of my possessions fit into a rucksack. That was it. which was nice at the time, you know, like I wouldn't feel proud saying this now, you know, but at the time it felt very romantic that I could just up and go.
Yeah.
And so I went there, went to train with Grezzo, and man, what a revelation it was.
Was that in Rio?
It was in Sao Paulo to begin with. So I spent a few months in Sao Paulo, and then he took me back to his hometown of Petropolis for some different training there. And so Petropolis is about an hour or so from Rio City. It's up in the mountains, yeah. So there's Petropolis, then Teresópolis, and
Beautiful areas.
Gorgeous. But there were no distractions.
Yeah.
You know, like one of the reasons why I didn't want to be in Rio de Janeiro is because, you know, when you're early 20s, there's beaches and nightclubs and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, nah, I'm going to stay disciplined. So I was there up in Petropolis. It's where Helio Gracie had his family home. You know, so the story with Grezzo was a black belt from Carlson, and his father was a black belt from Helio. So his father's story is amazing. You want to hear about his father?
Absolutely.
His father's Grezzo Chavez, Grezzo Senior, Grezão, you know, and he was an orphan. He was like, when you say like a street kid, I mean literally the street kid. You know, like he was just surviving on the help of passers-by. And when he became a young man, he had the opportunity to join the Brazilian army. Or was it the army or the navy? I forget. You know, so he goes there, and they end up going, oh, he's a tough athletic kid. We'll get him boxing for the regiment. So he boxed. And then he was part of the gymnastics team. This was a big deal at this period of time in the 60s that they had a gymnastics team. And he had to do this display where there was how do you explain it? You know, like almost like a cheerleading style, like pyramids and things like this. Except being the Brazilian army, they were like throwing knives. You know, so he had to stand like to attention while knives threw and landed around him. So he had to demonstrate, you know, like this like physical control with the gymnastic part and the knives falling around him. And Helio Gracie, the military had brought him in to like come and pick athletes. You know, because most of Helio's guys were like high-ranking military officials, lawyers, doctors, this kind of thing.
Very well-connected guys.
Yeah, but they're not. These are not the guys who go on the street and pick fights.
Yeah.
You know? So you think, all right, I need some tough guys. You know, I'll get them from the army. So the Brazilian army invited him, and he looked and he said, like, this guy's a great athlete and he's got balls of solid rock. Give me him. And he trained him on the proviso that he would go and then challenge people. So they'd erect a ring in the town square, and he would get up there at like, you know, I don't know, 150 pounds wet through and say, I'll fight any man. You know, a dead, brave guy. You know, and you think like, well, now we know you get in the ring and you've got this preparation stuff. Imagine back then, people didn't really know. You didn't really imagine the courage.
Yeah.
You know, but obviously, tough life made him hard. And so Grezzo had grown up just trained jiu-jitsu from, you know, basically out nappies into a gi. And his father, when he gets to 18 years old, says, okay, you've come as far as you can in this city, go to Rio and find the Gracies. And so this was at the time when, you know, like before Baja and Carlson was split, they just had separate nights. Just so happened.
Yeah, same gym.
Yeah, well done. So, but you've talked about the story before on the podcast.
Yeah.
There's no need to go over it again. Grezzo just happened to turn up on Carlson's night. Carlson said, cool, you're my guy. You know, and so he became part of the Carlson team. Then obviously the family kind of rick happened, so Sunday dinners must have been a bit tense at Grezzo's house with the Helio black belt and the Carlson black belt.
Yeah.
But he basically what Grezzo done, he'd been qualified as a black belt through his father, and in his town at the time was a black belt. Then he gets there to Carlson's gym with all of the characters that everybody knows.
Wait, so his dad had already graded him to black belt?
Graded him to black belt.
At 18?
Yes. Yeah. But when he got there, of course, he's training with all these different people, you know, and he said, like, so he goes there and Carlson says, okay, I'll pass the guard at this little purple belt here. Should be no problem for you. And he goes there, he's fucking trying to pass the guard. He can't pass the guard. It's driving him nuts, you know, and at the end the session comes, he hasn't passed the guard once, and he goes there and he takes off his black belt and he says, Carlson, I don't deserve this. Please give it back to me when you feel like the time's right. And he went and put on a blue belt. And then he tells the story. He tells the story at seminars. It's real good. So I'm going to blow his good story for him now. And he says, guess who the purple belt was? It was fucking Ricardo De La Riva. He said, if I'd known, I would have just kept the black belt. Nobody passes guard. So that was the story. So then he requalified as a black belt. And yeah, very, 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 very interesting guy.
That's an arse whooping when you're a black belt and you don't demote yourself to brown or purple all the way down the ladder to blue belt.
It must have been a rough one. Yeah. But he taught me a lot of things about the Carlson team that were very, very interesting, about the methodology and about Carlson himself. And a lot of the time, like, I mean, I remember some techniques Krezzo taught me and stuff like that, but really, like, it was these bits of information that he would communicate what I needed to know via what Carlson told him that he needed to know. So he told me some real good stories. One day, Krezzo was still there with the blue belt, and Carlson arranged this gym like a sports team. There was only one athlete would go, so they used to say the real competition is the Saturday before in the gym.
That's right.
And then the qualifier gets to go there. So for a long time, he couldn't re-achieve the black belt because De La Riva was in his spot. So he was devastated because he never got to fight Holler Gracie. He always wanted to get to go with him. But then the opportunity went to De La Riva because he was in the senior spot. So anyway, when he moves up to purple belt, it's because there was a gap in the team. So Carlson comes to Krezzo and says, like, okay, I got some good news and some bad news. You're going to fight as a purple belt next week. He said, oh, amazing, thank you. He said, bad news is you're going to go up a weight, and your first match is Renzo Gracie.
Oh, wow.
He's like, right. So he's, oh man, Christ, right, I need to train hard.
This is Renzo Gracie as a purple belt?
Renzo went back when they were the first. Krezzo and Renzo fought twice, and I think it was both a purple belt, perhaps.
Wow.
So the first fight, at least, was definitely a purple belt.
It's so mad to think of these guys, like these legendary figures, as being purple belts ever, right?
Yeah. But again, there wasn't as many black belts. It was still like I mean, even now, actually, the purple belt divisions are some prestige divisions.
Well, I imagine that there was probably less, almost certainly, definitely at the time, there'll be way less black belts in Brazil back then than there are in the UK now.
Yeah.
So yeah, this would have been like the UK maybe 5 years ago.
Brown and black belts were amalgamated in competition.
Yeah.
Like people think, like people won't do it now because they think like your black belt doesn't want to lose to a brown belt, but they're the same division. Like and they knew this in Brazil back then. So like it's sort of you just put them together. It's the same level. It's fine. Yeah. But yeah, so he's gonna fight. He's gonna fight Renzo Gracie next week as a purple belt. So I need to train extra hard. I said no. Carlson says no, you don't. Like Krezzo was like an overtrainer because he had the wrestling mentality. He would just go and run his legs off. He'd be doing sprints on the beach, and Carlson would go, no man, just relax, save some energy for training later. But he was like an addictive trainer. So instead, what Carlson does is say, come with me, different lesson today, and he takes him to the cockfights. Like Carlson, like obviously it's not acceptable now.
Yeah.
But Carlson loved the cockfights.
Yes. And
he said he takes him to see this match, and this bird is being picked apart, it just refuses to give up, and then finally this bird gets back up and kills its opponent. It's probably half dead, but it's killed its opponent now, because it just outright refused to give up. And Carlson says to Krezzo, if you can muster 50% of the courage that this fighting cock has, you beat anybody. And that was the lesson for the day. And this was just incredibly powerful for him. Obviously now cockfighting is not an acceptable sport, even in Brazil. The Carlson's logo. You know the story of this.
Yes.
Where it was a fighting cock.
Yeah.
And this is the one that Carlson liked, but it was it Arbentação, the brand said no, we can't show cockfighting as part of our thing. We'll make it a bulldog. Probably Carlson didn't like the bulldog because in his later years he took on kind of the appearance of, people would say he looked like a bulldog, and he didn't like it. So yeah, he didn't like that logo. He always wanted it to return to being the fighting cock, but that was
which is quite funny because like being a bulldog in the UK is considered quite complimentary. Like you're big, you're tough, you're strong.
Yeah.
But no, I have heard that he was big into the fighting cocks.
Yeah, but like this had a big impact on Krezzo. So he used to tell me all these little stories, about Carlson, but like in a way to communicate to me what I needed to know.
Yeah, it's interesting that we, I think people maybe don't appreciate as much. They think when they think of their lineage, they think that it's only techniques that are being passed down. But actually, a lot of the time, the thing that's being passed down the most is the mentality and the mindset, the stories and the culture of an individual in a gym more so than the techniques a lot of the time.
This is what seems to be with Carlson in particular. That like nobody talks about Carlson did this technique, that technique. Like everybody just talks about things that he did, things that he said, the attitude that he had. And sometimes you'll see like there's a picture of him with Walid Ismail, and Walid is in his gi, and he must have been like bashed after a tough fight, and Carlson's stroking his hair like he's his son. Like the kind of like affection of a father and son. And so I've asked Chris, I said, like, what was it that was special about Carlson then? Because you never tell me, oh, he did his arm lock this way, he stroked this way. He said, no, he said, like, Carlson had great eyes. So if Carlson was in your corner and he told you what to do, if you did it, you won. Simple as that. 100% of the time. If you followed his orders, he could see what it took to win this fight. Which is like, that's another aspect of coaching skill that like you've either got or you haven't. There's loads of people that can like take footage of fights and break things down. Loads of people better than me. And I look and I think like, oh Christ, I watched that fight and I didn't even realize that. That's really cool. Well done. But when you watch it in slow motion from the camera angle, you can play it back 10 times. It's not that there's no skill to it, but it's a very different skill to doing it in real time. And this
thing you can pause it and you can have a look at where the hand position is.
And when you know what happened, it's much easier to work back. When you're trying to see into the future about all the possible things that could happen, that's where it takes a real good coach to tell you what to do in between rounds. Like I've had some real shit ones and some really good ones. And you just the exact right thing to say. Like my coach Alan Orr, he was wonderful at this. He would give me just the right amount of information, just the right thing. And if I did what Alan said, I would win the fight. If I didn't, I lost. But like it was simple things. And sometimes I could be getting overwhelmed by information, or I'd be getting sort of made to feel negative by some people. I had some terrible cornermen. I had one guy, like he got some. Our main coach couldn't come, so he got some adrenaline. So he showed me, said, okay, you take
literally a syringe of adrenaline.
Yeah. But like he didn't know to cut it with the Vaseline. So like he came in between rounds and whacked neat adrenaline on my eye. And I was like, what? Fucking hell. So I couldn't see. And then like, so I'm fighting the whole fight, protecting this cut that didn't fucking exist. I had a graze. And he stuck fucking neat adrenaline on it. So I got back to the dressing room afterwards and said, right, we're going to see the doctor, get this stitched on. He's like, no, there's no cut there. I said, what the fuck did you blind me with adrenaline for? He said, I just wanted to see if it worked.
Is adrenaline meant to like reduce the blood then?
It's a
vasoconstrictor.
Yeah. But you don't put it on neat. You cut it with the Vaseline. Actually, you don't use adrenaline anymore. It's because a very small percentage of people have an allergic reaction. So there's another product.
Was that quite a common thing that people would use then?
Yeah, I mean, it was like you'd have to be a pro boxing coach to get it.
Okay.
But we didn't get things the right way. As you do. Yeah. So I mean, it wasn't cheating. It was just that we didn't have the license to get the stuff. But we got it anyway. But yeah, so you don't use adrenaline anymore, but it's essentially a similar substance that doesn't have the risk attached.
Really interesting point that you just made me think of, which is these coaches that have so much influence over the outcome of the fight, in which they say, do this, and if you do this, you win. And if you don't do this, you lose. And that's the reality. And it kind of makes you start to wonder how much success of the average fighter is due to the individual and how much is due to the coach.
It's very, very hard to pin those things down. And then you've got to further, I think you've had this discussion with somebody before on the podcast. What is more important, a good coach or good training partners?
Yeah.
It can be it's part of the same equation. Very, very hard to know. It's difficult to say.
I feel like some, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like some people need a coach more than other people, and there can be a really big difference between those two.
Like I love to see it when like the coaches that play the fight like a PlayStation game. Move left, move right, throw the jab, and like when you see it done well, it's beautiful. You think like, wow, this guy is like a machine, like the Hugh Jackman film of the
real still.
Yeah, like this kind of thing. Like there's a beautiful synthesis going on. I think it's marvelous. Me personally, I'm the other way. Like if I'm saying nothing, it's going good. Even when things are precarious, you know, the guy's in a niche inverted triangle position or something like that. If I'm sitting there saying nothing, I say, oh, that's cool, because we worked on this last week.
Yeah.
And I just say, son, you know what to do. You know,
Yeah.
I might like only open my mouth to say he's doing this. There's something that you can't see. You know, but I'm not trying to give him instructions on what to do. And it works for some guys and it works for some coaches. It doesn't work for me. But if you see me shouting, shit's gone wrong, because I know the guy doesn't know what to do. You know? So me personally, I'm like a quiet coach, and it works for some people. It doesn't work for others. But I used to hate it when guys would get me beforehand, you know, and they'd be like trying to slap my face and go, "It's your fight, it's your fight." And I go, "Yes, I know it's my fight." That's a meaningless statement. It's like, you don't need to wind me up. I'm gonna hit him. It's all right.
Yeah.
You can see this too with, like, you know, guys in weigh-ins and stuff like that when they give it like
Yeah.
push and pull
Yeah.
and go and all that. I'm like,
We're fighting tomorrow.
it's like it's all right, you know. Like, I'm like, you don't have to pick a fight with me. I signed I've been getting ready for it and everything. Like, that's why I'm here. Like, don't worry, I'm definitely gonna hit you tomorrow. You know, like, so, but I guess some guys thrive on this.
That's what you said about the coaching, which is like the coaching is knowing whether someone needs to be hyped up or not.
Yeah. That's or more or less aroused. That's the
optimum state of arousal. Yeah.
That's like going to corners and say, "How aroused are you feeling today?" I love this terminology. Yeah.
Do I need to arouse you even more?
Yeah.
Okay, back to Brazil. So you're with Creso?
Grezio.
And so you're out in Brazil. You're in Sao Paulo,
I was in Sao Paulo for about 3 months.
and then
I went to
the
Metropolis.
How long were you over in Brazil for?
So I just did the 6 months on, 6 months off thing, and
how long?
I just only did it for a couple of years, you know, but it felt like a long time. You know, like,
it is a long time. That's a year with over two. That's a year of time spent in Brazil over 2 years.
In terms of like how condensed the training was, I mean, I was hitting 3 and 4 a day. You know,
Wow.
so I was like, I mean, I was totally overtrained. Like, I was doing sleeping 11 hours, and then all I would do is eat, train. Then Sunday would come, and I would just be goosed. You know, but like it did help me to advance rapidly, but kind of push my body a little bit too hard.
And how was that experience out there in Brazil?
Oh, it was wonderful. Just having it made me feel really special at the time. You know, like, which is like, now it's not that. I mean, it's not that it's not a big deal, but it's not uncommon. Yeah. But at the time, like, it made me feel really special, and you know, I was learning how to speak Portuguese and having a different experience of life. You know, and it was so far removed from how I'd lived before. I think like nobody else around me from my sort of social class was doing this, you know. So I came back, you know, and it was a bit sad to get back. And then I had problems getting housed. There'd been a administrative error that had meant that I'd left with some debts that I thought I was all paid up on the council flat, and so I came back and I had debts, but I couldn't clear the debts because I couldn't get a job, and I couldn't get a job because I didn't have an address, and I was in the homelessness cycle straight away.
Wow.
So this was pretty unfortunate. So I ended up in a halfway house, and not to be judgmental to anybody, but everybody else there just got out of prison. A lot of them had substance abuse problems, and I was looking around thinking, like, fuck, how did I end up here? You know, like, all I was trying to do was trying to be an elite athlete, and I'm in the same position as if I just got out of jail. And I'm not being judgmental to anybody who's been through the prison system, but you know, I felt like, man, this is a little bit frightening. I hadn't anticipated this. And just by virtue of being part of a gym, people say, "Nah, don't sleep there. You can sleep on my couch." My coach said, "You can sleep in the gym if you need to." You know, but every day somebody would take me home until I could pull enough money together to get a deposit and move on like this. But put me to homelessness.
Wow.
But of course, the next thing that I did was save up enough money, go back and do it all again. Yeah, because it was that great. It was so good to be there.
Yeah.
But I had no success at all in Brazil as an athlete.
Were you competing much over there?
I made the mistake of competing on big tournaments because I wanted so much to win something prestigious. So I was competing in the Mundials. You didn't have to qualify for the Mundials as a foreigner then, so I could go straight in. And at the Rio State Open or whatever it was.
Did you get your blue belt out there?
I had my blue belt from Dave Elliott.
Oh wow!
But
so you were training with Dave when you were over here?
yeah, I just started like a short time. I don't know how many, a matter of months. I really can't remember now. My memory is not.
It was a long time ago.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I had a blue belt, but it wasn't really.
You had it before you went over to Brazil?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which was, it would have been better if I'd gone as a white belt.
Sure.
Because I got it put on me hard, and
But in a way, there's an advantage to that as well, which is when there's a target on your back, you got to step up to that, right?
It did. The training environment was pretty ruthless. There was not a great deal of camaraderie. You know, they wanted to smash the gringo. You know, so like I got a very excellent reception from the coaches, who were very, very generous with the time. Some of the teammates just wanted to smash me, and then there was a handful who were beautiful to me. You know, there's a guy. He was a brown belt at the time, obviously black belt now. Juninho Piranha, like what a great guy. He would just be so generous with his time and his hospitality. And I had a guy, Pedro Galvão. Pedro was just like a super talented guy, but it was just his hobby. You know, like he's black belt now, but he was a purple belt for about 10 years. But he was so talented. He was just like, he had one, knee and sleeve sweep.
Yeah.
You threaten the armbar and then just flip the guy. I don't know the names. Do you know what? I know the names for everything in wrestling because I learned from an American. You know, like, and I know none of the names for any jiu-jitsu techniques at all. You know,
I mean, I'm pretty bad with that, to be honest.
Yeah,
Trying to get better now in commentating.
The Brazilian method is like, I say, oh, what's this technique called? You know, that one. Yeah. And then I'll go, okay, right, overhook, underhook. How do you say that? They go, esgrima, pummel. I'm like, yeah, but like pummeling to get an overhook or an underhook. Esgrima. It's all the same. Like, it's a weird language, Portuguese, in that, like, you know, it's got this really complex conjugation, and then like oppositely a verbiage. You know, where we've got such a rich language in English that we're just spoiled for synonyms.
Yes.
Yeah. We're like, think like, how have you not got a word for overhook or underhook? That just, to me, that was nuts.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I lost the thread of what I was saying again. What am I on about?
That's all right. We were talking about, we're just talking about you training in Brazil.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, but I was there for a very short period of time, but it was so influential to my life. You know, it just made me change my perspective on absolutely everything. It was, and I had the access to this history of jiu-jitsu. I became like rich in the history of jiu-jitsu because I was so close to the source. I was telling you about Quesio's fight with Renzo. Got sidetracked again. We never got to the actual fight.
Oh yeah.
Well, this is just a funny story, but yeah, like Quesio said, like he got to the side of the mat and Renzo's walking up and down, stalking, like looking at him like Apollo Creed, going, I want you, I'm gonna smash you. You know, like in the matches before the quarter, he's going like, you better win this fight because I'm gonna get you in the next round. I'm gonna make a mess of you. He's giving him the whole thing. You know,
I feel like Renzo was always big into that psychological warfare.
Yeah. So then Quesio goes in there, they have a great fight, and Quesio wins.
Quesio win?
He won the fight. Yeah. Yeah, he said, and Renzo goes, wow, that was a great fight, man. Come on, let's get a beer.
Yeah.
And starts chatting with him, you know, being a buddy to him, you know. And then a few months later, they meet again, you know. And Renzo's walking up and down going, I want you. I'm going to smash you. I'm going to do it. They said, well, you've already done this trick once. It doesn't work once you've asked me to go for a beer. You know what I mean? So, you know, but yeah, funny guy. Yeah.
With that sort of stuff, because we do see it occasionally with some athletes in MMA or in jiu-jitsu, that intensity, do you think that's more... If I'm doing it, do you think that's to get in your head or to help me get where I need to be in my head?
It really depends on the individual. Yeah, I think it could be some and some. It could be one or the other. You know, it just depends on the individual, and it works on some people and doesn't. It works for some people and works on some people and not on others. You know, I never got anything out of trying to psych somebody else out, and I never ever got psyched out. Like I quite liked it when people would try to intimidate me and stuff. You know, like it gave me a little bit of satisfaction that they couldn't provoke me.
Yeah,
but people make a lot out of like the psychological games and stuff like that because it looks good on like movie style.
It does. I mean, it's the Conor McGregor effect, right?
Yeah, and of course it's real. It is real with McGregor, but yeah,
it's hot. I don't know whether it is because I don't know how much of the McGregor stuff is him trying to be the biggest showman he can for the money, and for the drama and stuff, the hype. how much of it is to get into his opponent's head, and how much is it to get in him where he needs to be? Because you see, when he does all of that, and the person doesn't really bite on that, I feel that it's positive for the opponent. Like when we've seen it against Khabib, we've seen it against Poirier in his later fights, where he's come in talking a lot of shit, and they've just been like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, some people are immune to it, and once the trick has been exposed, once you know that it's just a piece of theatre, well then it loses a lot of its power. Yeah. But for me, I never paid any attention to it. I don't know if it makes me a good or a bad person. I'm not sure. But I just liked hurting people. Not for any personal reason. I liked getting hurt, and I liked hurting people. And I didn't have to say anything or get any provocation. I just said, cool, you signed it there. I can try to hurt you as much as I can within the rules, and you can do the same back to me.
And do you think that that's an interesting topic, which is this innate desire for many humans, especially men, to express violence upon others, and whether that is something that, in your experience as a coach, because I feel that there are some, you see it, like I said, obviously I see a lot of fighters through Cage Warriors, and I feel like there's this very obvious difference between a fighter and a martial artist. Whether they fight in different ways is irrelevant. One of them wants to hurt someone, and the other one just wants to do the sport.
Yeah.
Have you also found that there's that differentiation between those two?
Yeah, I should say so. I think I started as a fighter, and I've ended up being a martial artist because it's an occupation, and because my pleasure now is in understanding things and knowing things.
Yeah.
But my pleasure then was in like hurting and being hurt, and that's really what it did for me. I got injured because I didn't have that athletic base, and then I started training as a full-time athlete, and then I just overtrained, gave myself a lot of injuries. I was unlucky in a couple of fights. I got eye gouged and I can't see very well, and I got spiked in a training session, and I can't move so good, and that, so I started doing kickboxing for a little while. I just couldn't wrestle anymore because my head was constantly going into spasm, and I got some, everybody who's out game, you end up with some bulging discs and stuff like that. But that's kind of what did for me, And the sport was done with me. Like I didn't, I was like an early man, didn't quite make it. I probably could have, if I'd been a little bit luckier, got on a UFC undercard. But a couple of the fights that I had, you could have chucked them on a UFC undercard, and nobody would have thought they were amiss, But I was never going to be champion or anything. Like I was never going to make life-changing money. So it's a bit irrelevant now. It mattered to me because all I wanted was a pair of gloves that had UFC written on them. Yeah. And then now, of course, with the perspective of an adult, I think, fucking hell, I don't want anything to do with that company. They're awful. But it's the premiership, isn't it? But so really there was no, like, I wasn't really able to make a living at it. So I'm kickboxing, and if one fight fell through, I'd have to do 2 fights the next month, and I loved that. It was great. I was like fighting 2 weekends back to back. Wow, it was a rush. I loved it. Sometimes I would even I was addicted to fighting. Where I would take my shorts in my bag to a show if I was cornering, just in case anybody pulled out. And then I would feel like a coward because I hadn't fought that night. Even though I knew I was fighting next week. It was nuts.
Is that because the rush of fighting?
Well, yeah. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's like a drug. So either you do more. So every time I would fight, I'd go off the prelims to the main card. Then I was top of the bill. Then I was top of the bill in a stadium. And then my face is on the poster. And then I started creeping back down. So I think, okay, well, I've got to do more than I've got to do a fight every weekend. So it was like partly I was partly for the money, but partly just because I needed that fix. Like I didn't feel okay unless I was fighting all the time. Wow. And even in the gym, we used to do way too much hard sparring, but I needed that fix all the time. Like a drug addict, essentially was. Like all I'd really done was swap one set of bad habits for another. But I was getting applause. You know, I was getting, you know, the more that I was willing to hurt myself, you know, the more pats on the back I would get.
It's a socially accepted addiction.
Yeah.
And that drug is something that your body produces, but it's still very much the same effect.
But I was just self-harming in the end, you know, like just the same as
But I feel like this is a common story for every single, almost unanimously every single pro fighter, which is nobody finishes on top, really. You know, I mean, the one guy, and that's why I was terrified when he came back, but like for me, GSP was the one who got out when he was on top. When he came back years later, I was like, please, for the love of God, why? And then got the win, and then back, and then he's out again. You know, I guess Khabib is another one for different reasons who got out on top. But you see these legends peak and then fall, and then if they're lucky, they get out after a while, and if they're unlucky, like Masvidal's just retired, hopefully he stays retired. He's still relatively young. He's still pretty much in good shape. It was a smart decision, but you'll see guys like Anderson Silva, even though like he's boxing now and doing really well, you've seen this huge fall, and it just seems that he is so addicted to the rush of fighting, he will keep doing it until he can't do it physically, can't do it anymore.
It's so hard to let it go. I mean, you know the bind. If you lost, well, you can't go out on a loss. You got to keep trying to get that one win back, and then you win one, you think, I can still do this. So there's no end to it, you know. And it's not just the thrill, it's the lifestyle. Owen was talking about this. You know, they're like, you don't know anything else. That is how you live. You know, and it's very, very hard to adjust, you know, like in some way. I don't want to equate it to a prison, but
there's this institutionalized.
You are institutionalized. Yeah, you institutionalize yourself, you know, and then when you have to try to exist in the real world, it's really frightening. It's very tempting to go back and try to relive those things. So like I had to retire for some injury reasons, and I thought I could move on and do something else, and then I just couldn't let it go. It was so hard to let it go.
This was 2013.
It's end of 2013. I had a retirement fight, and then I just thought,
which you won.
Yeah. Because I'd had kind of a good year. I think Globo Fando beat me on points. He was a pretty good fighter. I don't wonder what happened to him. You know, but yeah, he was a nightmare for me. He was like, I was like, now man, just stand in front of me and let me hit you. Come on, play the game. Yeah. But he was a great mover. So I struggled with him, and I think Kevin Ward beat me on points as well. I couldn't put a glove on him. He's like 6'4", and I was like trying to dunk a basketball, trying to punch him in the face. I just walked into him and just got chin. But like, you know, like I wasn't getting knocked out, and I think I won like 8 out of 10, and all the ones I lost on points. And I just thought, okay, this is not getting any better. You know, I'm fighting at the same venues, and the money's not going up, and just give it up now before your brains are scrambled, because I could feel myself getting punchy. And people were saying like, well, you know, I know you still talk fine. You see, you know, I wasn't slurring my words, but I knew I was getting punchy. I was forgetting things. I was getting like time lapse, you know, where all of a sudden I'd be in a different room. I was thinking, how did I get here? How much time has gone by? This kind of stuff. And I thought, I have to give this up.
Smarter than most fighters.
But it was really tough, because I felt completely empty afterwards. So I tried to have a comeback. I thought, right, cool, well, I'll have a tune-up fight. Then the tune-up fight fell through. And my teacher Alan said, I'm going to Thailand. So like, you know, one of the things that, you know, I couldn't fight for the UFC. That wasn't going to be a possibility. But the one thing I hadn't done was fight a Thai in Thailand. You know, that was, you know, like, you know, the ambition from having watched Van Damme when I was a kid, you know. So I thought, cool, we'll go and do that. That'll be my tune-up. But Alan knew, he said, you know, it was just a swan song. So we just had this nice fight. I had a good experience, you know. And I was thinking like, am I just not who I used to be? Have I lost it? Can I not cut it anymore? And it was just the same as all the other ones, and it was great. I had a wonderful time. I had the best feeling. But I just knew, I just came to terms with the fact that this is up, it's over. I can't keep doing this anymore. You know, and I didn't want the day to end. I just stayed up all night because I just didn't want that feeling to go away that I thought, because I'm never going to feel this way again. But when I look back and I thought, what actually did for me? Yeah, the injuries, the earning potential and stuff. But I didn't want to hurt the guy anymore. It was weird, because the kid was, throwing some elbows at me. And I went to elbow him back, and I thought, I hit him on the gloves and forearms on purpose, because I knew he's a journeyman, you know, like he needs his money next weekend. It doesn't make any difference to me. If I got a cut and I thought it was funny because I've got a souvenir, and you know, it doesn't make any difference to me. But I thought, if I cut him, he's not going to get his money in next week. You know? And so like I was low kicking him and landing a good low kick, and I thought, do you know what, I'll just lay off, because like if he's limping, you know, he might not make his money next week. I thought, this is not a champion mentality, you know. And I didn't want to hit him in the head. And I look back at some like later bouts, and I like sparring, I would hit people full power to the body, and I hit them full power to the legs. And I realized I was just tapping them on the head. And I was saying, it's because I've got fragile hands, you know, like, because I had glass hands. And so I would just do like a Joe Kawasaki shoe shine, you know. But like, then I realized, I was trying not to hit his brain. And I thought, and it was when my daughter was born.
Really?
I just all of a sudden just didn't want to hurt people anymore. Like, I'd learned to compete by that time. I really enjoyed competing, you know, which is not something I had to begin with. I really struggled. I was not a good competitor. It took me a lot of time to work it out. But I was a good competitor, and I still like competing. I got like a lot of thrill from it. But I didn't like hurting anybody anymore. And I thought, that's up. This is the herd business. I can't be doing this no more. So it was quite reassuring, because it was too late for me anyway. I wasn't going to have any more success. So it was actually quite a nice way to close out. I thought, well, I didn't get what I wanted, but I got what I needed. And
do you have any advice for any fighters who are making that transition out of the game to make that easier, instead of having to go cold turkey and suffer sort of some of the lows of not having that part of their life there anymore?
Well, I mean, what I say to guys now is, like, you remember Brian Clough told all his professional footballers to go and get a trade. You know, this is a famous story where all the England players were going, but I'm a professional footballer. I have made it. He was like, right, son, you're all going to learn to be sparkies and plumbers and whatever else.
Really?
Because it was. I mean, obviously the money wasn't quite what it was back in those days. Back in those days. But wise advice. So now, if I've got people now, I'm going to say, like, look, if you're going to do this, Plan B doesn't mean I don't believe in you, because I always took it this way. When people say, come on, you got to do something, you got to do something else in case this doesn't work out. And I was like, fuck you don't believe in me. I'm going to be one of those stories. But of course, all of those stories are reverse engineered by people who made it and then go, it was the power of my self-belief that made it for me, and there is no such thing as luck, which is what you have to tell yourself at the time. That you're governing all of the factors. But so much of life is luck, and you need a plan B. And it doesn't mean that you don't believe in it. It just means that you appreciate that the sport is not fair. No, the world is not fair. And you need to govern for that. In terms of people who are actually retiring, even if they've got this plan B, and even if they're lucky to have people in their lives that love them for other reasons, it's. I think the expression that people use is like intrinsic value. For me personally, I didn't have anything good in my life until I started fighting and winning fights, and then people started to treat me with respect, and then people started to want to be around me, want to know me, and in a way that nobody ever had before. So for me, my self-esteem was completely contingent on the fact that I was winning fights, and so I'd get terribly depressed when I had a slump, when I was trying to compete jiu-jitsu in Brazil and I wasn't doing very well. I thought, well, I'm a worthless, meaningless person. Then I started to win again, and people started wondering. I said, okay, right, cool, I've got value. And then when I stopped fighting, all of a sudden, all of those people were gone. I had no value to them anymore. To move on to the next person. And so I thought, well, I'm worthless again. Of course, this is, I think you just have to understand that it's just a fleeting thing. And it's not that it's not real, like the love and adoration that you get from a crowd, it's real, it really exists.
Yes.
But it only exists for a moment. And the people who really love you, they're going to love you just the same, whether you got knocked out in the first round, or whether you came home with some gorgeous championship belt, and it doesn't make any difference to them. And if you lose perspective on who's who, and you don't cultivate this notion of having intrinsic value, then that once the plug is pulled on the career, well, you're never going to get that other kind of love. But you got to realize it was just temporary. It's not fake. It's just very temporary.
Superficial.
It's very superficial. Because there's, like we're talking about McGregor and his persona. Like there's this is you. This is part of you. It's not quite pro wrestling where it's an actual character. The character is. I should you get when you're presenting, when you're teaching your seminars and when you're presenting the show, you're not being false. You're presenting the professional Dan Strauss.
Yeah,
it's part of you. It is. But it's not the whole you. So the person that you present, who's the champion, it's just a part of you, and it's a very small part of you. And if you let it be your all, you're gonna end up stringing yourself up.
Eventually, that's gonna come back to bite you.
Yeah. But yeah, I was really lucky that I had a few of the right people around to help me out, and it was actually friends that I'd made through jiu-jitsu. But nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. It was completely different.
I feel like, interestingly enough, I think that the people who value you not for your accomplishments within the sport are people in the sport. Because if you're a black belt, you walk down the street, maybe people think that's impressive. But if you're a black belt in a gym with 10 black belts, you're just another dude. It kind of takes all of that stuff out, and I feel like for that reason, a lot of fighters can see other fighters, or in my case, jiu-jitsu guys can see other jiu-jitsu guys for more of who they are as a person outside of jiu-jitsu than the people outside of jiu-jitsu, which is strange because you'd expect it to be the other way.
It's really hard to know. It's really hard to know who's who until the time comes when the chips are down, or you have no more business value to that person. With these guys who, God man, they were my best friend. They loved me because they knew all they had to do was pick up the phone. I would come and save the show, fight whoever you wanted me to fight on 24 hours notice. Oh yeah, of course you love me. Never hear from them again. And then then out of the blue, I'll have some promoter, like Dale from Made for the Cage. Well, you just send me a message and say like, "How you doing, buddy? Hope you're well." I said, "Oh, what's up?" "Nothing, just checking in." You don't know who the person is. There's people I used to train with every day, and we never talk anymore. And then there's people that that I can count on no matter what. But you don't find out until it's over. It's very hard. This is why. How do you give advice on this? How do you spot the person? Oh, no. Well, fuck everything up, and then see who's still there by your side. See who's got your back.
That is, yeah.
It's very hard to tell.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we've spoken a little bit about retirement, but let's talk a little bit about that career that you had, because you did have a storied MMA career after you come back from Brazil. Like you said earlier, you've got these tricks, secrets, advantages, and you're fighting pro MMA. You have how many fights did you have? It was
I had about 50 something in total, but that was Thai fights, kickboxing fights, and MMA fights. I think I had about half a year, about 25 each.
It's quite a lot of MMA fights, especially.
Yeah,
it must have been, and it must have been crazy back then because it wasn't established like it is now.
Yeah, I always wanted to do 100 fights, but I don't know why I had that in my head. So I felt like I kind of came up short by 50%. But actually, that wasn't a realistic number. That was only a few guys.
That's 50% less.
Just guys, it's
brain damage.
Yeah, but there's only a few guys like Paul Jenkins and stuff like that who could accomplish 100 fights.
Yeah.
Or guys who, or on the other hand, guys who were bums. Like lose almost. To have 100 competitive fights, that was a bit unrealistic in the window. But also, I shortened up the window a little bit by overtraining, so I didn't get as many bouts as I wished I'd had. My boxing coach Martin Holgate, who sadly passed away a while ago, one time he just said to me, he said, "Pete, why don't you just take a year off, just a year or two?" And I was like, "No way, I'll be dead by then. There's not a year to spare. So you just take a step back and make this last a little bit longer. Just take a year off and get schooled a little bit, recover your body a little bit." And I completely rejected what he said. And I think now, why did I not listen to to the wise man. But unfortunately, yeah, like I had to keep going. Like I believed I could mind over matter everything, you know. And so it took a few years off. But yeah, so I had about 25 or so MMA fights.
And you had them all around the world.
Oh yeah, I had some real good times. Yeah, like I went. What was the best? I fought in Belgium actually, which was dead cool. That was a wild place. Yeah, it was the first time they'd allowed professional MMA in Belgium. So it was in Charleroi, and I fought a guy called Ivan Musado. Musado was good. He beat. He had the Cage Warriors title for one stint. Oh Christ, who did he beat? Somebody good. This is the brain damage kicking in. The Irishman, pro boxer, the guy who was the first guy to beat McGregor.
Is it Joe?
Yes, yeah, Joe. Oh, I feel terrible for forgetting his name because he's such a good fighter. This is just the brain damage. It's not disrespect to him. Yeah. Oh, anyway, he was a tremendous fighter.
I know who you're talking about.
But yeah, even beat him for the Cage Warriors world title. So he was a credible opponent. But like, that was a wild place, Charleroi too. They took me to the hotel, and we're driving down the street, and then around the corner the other way, like a car full of guys with like a open back pickup, with like guys with AK-47s pointing in the air. I was like, what? Fucking hell, where am I? And they took me to the hotel, and there was blood all over the bed. I was like, fucking hell. Like, where am I?
Where was this?
In Charleroi in Belgium. It was awesome, actually. I'm making it sound bad, but it was awesome. Yeah. So it was. So they took me to the weigh-in, and the weigh-in's in like a nightclub, but like on the street where the nightclub was all brothels with like like Amsterdam style girls in the window dancing. But on the other side of the street is like residential homes where there's kids playing football in the front garden and stuff, and a little girl playing with dollies, and there's girls dancing on the other side. I was like, am I having like a weird trip here? Like it was just the maddest place I've ever been. But anyway, it was absolutely class. So like, yeah, I fought Ivan there, and like I made the mistake when you fight, because I was always fighting taller guys because I was short for my weight, and Ivan was shorter than me. And I thought, oh cool, I'll be able to like jab him. So I went out and I jabbed down at a shorter man. It's like the cardinal sin in boxing. Like, it was the most stupid mistake. I came straight out, tried to jab down at him, and he bombed me with the overhand, put me right on my arse. And I was like seeing three of them coming towards me, and I went like, oh wow, I've fought here before. And they were like, yeah, I fought this guy before. This actual fight's happened before.
No.
Thought, oh no, he must have decked me because I'm having deja vu. No. Quick, get up. It was like, it was wild.
Wow.
But so like I kind of like, anyway, he won the first round with a knockdown. And I won the second round, and then they stopped it on cuts. Like I'd given like just a little like grazing left hook, and he just had a little cut, and they were paranoid because it was the first legal show. So it was so sad because I never got to finish the fight. But then I realized this was kind of like, even though like I didn't count the victory as a victory, we were around a piece, I counted it as a draw. I told the guy afterwards, I said like, I'm sorry man, if we ever get back together again, we can do it again. Like it doesn't count. I don't consider it a victory. But it felt for me like it was a moral victory, because like I wasn't thinking like, yes, it's over and I'm getting my hand raised. I was thinking, oh shit man, I was really just starting to enjoy that, and now we had another 5 minutes of that we could have had. Now it's over. Yeah. Damn. And I thought, okay, I've really started to love to compete. I've learned how to compete finally. I'm not just wanting to win. I really want to compete, and then the win comes as a byproduct of the process, which sounds very obvious when we're talking now in terms of like that's basic sports psychology. But
I think that a lot of people don't see it that way.
It takes I'd read all these things beforehand, but it took me a long time to get out of that, the fixation on the result. Yeah. And this is what was causing me to underperform and have the brakes on all the time. And once I really started to enjoy competing, then, the wins would just come as part of the process. It's a very, very simple thing to say, but I think it takes some amount of experience to accomplish this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, which other good fights did I have? What was fun?
Russia. Do you fight in Russia?
I do, for kickboxing in Russia.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that?
That was awesome. That was amazing experience. With we got to see like Red Square and like the people's palaces of the underground and stuff. But it was so cool. It was like minus God knows what. But I was still rehydrating, so I had my bottle of water with me, and I went to drink, and I was like, "What the fuck is in that bottle?" It frozen onto my beard as the water had touched there. It was that cold.
Wow.
It was a wonderful experience. And Yeah, and then I got chinned by a Russian. Like, it was like you know, like God knows what the fuck was in it. There was a horseshoe in them gloves. You know, like yeah. Like, I mean, because Thai hand wraps, you can wrap them pretty gnarly anyway. You know, but like, Jesus, man, I'd like. But I perforated my eardrum again, you know, so I'm pretty deaf in that ear now. And I had vertigo for ages afterwards. I was in a pretty bad way.
From that fight?
Yeah. If I was painting the gym wall and I was just standing on a step and I'm like hanging onto the wall, like I'm gonna fall down. I felt like it took me ages to recover from the vertigo. So yeah, but yeah, great place. But all the Russians, they were coming up to me afterwards going like, "Oh, let's get my picture taken." I was like, "But I lost." And they're like, "In Russia, we don't care. It was a good fight." Oh, cool. Just different mentality there. Like where I was dejected and I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to go home because I'd lost, and I had to wait for the transport because it wasn't my place. All the Russians came up and they were so cool about it. I really loved their attitude to the sport. Yeah, they just.
The other one that I've written down that I have to ask you about is it Ma Baogua?
Master Ma. I knew you were going to ask me about this. Yeah.
Tell me the story.
Just the shit thing is, this is the thing that I'm most internet famous for. I thought like any decent fight I had is like, it's not on YouTube, it's behind a paywall somewhere, or it's on a DVD in somebody's loft, and nobody nobody knows, nobody cares. And I'm famous because of this dickhead. Like, honestly, this guy. So obviously, like I was out of work after I'd finished fighting, and I needed some money, and my friend down in London, he coached a guy boxing. The guy was like I don't know what he was in, investment banking or something like that, but very, very wealthy guy. But this guy also would go over to China and train with this kung fu master Ma Baogua, and he's making a tribute film to him. And so he. As far as I understood, it was just, because obviously there was no film back in the day. Nobody ever seen his achievements as a young man or whatever. So he wanted to make him like a fluff piece, essentially, as a tribute to him, which all sounded really, really nice to me. So he wants to contrast the traditional with the modern sport, and they're looking for an uki for the film who can like demonstrate the look of modern martial arts against this traditional style. And I love martial arts. Like I love kung fu. Like it's I'm interested in any martial art. It doesn't matter if you're talking about, HEMA, sword fighting and stuff like that. I wish I had the time to get into all that stuff.
Tell me about it.
I just I'm a total nerd, so I'm interested in everything. So I wanted to see what the guy's martial arts was about. Yeah. And so I get there, and the guy, I'm saying, okay, give me direction. What do you want me to do? Like, how do you want me to fall? How do you want me to attack? And the guy's, okay, we'll just spar. I'm like, well, I can't spar because he's like 65 years old, Yeah. And I'm like, just spar, you'll figure it out. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we need to work something out here. This is like, because I'd done a little bit of fight choreography before. I'd been in a music video where like the storyline was that there was a bare knuckle fight going on, and me and the guy just had to work it out. We went pros at this, but it worked really good. I was like, I'm really pleased with the result, and it looked realistic enough, like it wasn't Raging Bull, but I've seen boxing movies that had less realistic looking punching, so I was really pleased with what we accomplished and what the camera team did. So I was thinking like, I was thinking it's going to be like this, where we rehearsed the moves and then we do them, and I was there to be the fall guy, like I wasn't like, wanting to beat him up. I was thinking like, well, how do I make this look good? And in the end, it just looked shit. And I'm going like, look, like this isn't going to look good enough. Like you need to like give us a stunt, like I'm going to fall a certain way and make it look like a real thing. Like you got to give me something. But the guy just wanted to do just some bullshit. It just didn't look good. And he was kind of like trying to eye poke me and stuff like that. And the guy was an arse, like he was just a prick. He used to, when people like talk to you and they'll kind of go like, I could have had you there. And he keep like kind of slapping me as if like, I could have got you. And I'm like, well, yeah, not really, but okay. So it was just dead awkward. Like I was just glad when it was over. And I said sorry to the guy. I said, look, I did my best, but I didn't really know. I couldn't understand what he was wanting me to give him. And anyway, we did some shui jiao, like which he was pretty good. This was the sad thing. Anyone who doesn't know shui jiao is just a Chinese style of jacket wrestling, and he was good. He was good at balance taking, But, you know, with judo, wrestling, etc., I'm trying to score inbounds. I'm trying to throw them on the mat. There's a push out in a lot of Chinese martial arts. If you see like sandar fighting where it's on a platform, like you can win by pushing them out. So he's trying to throw me off the mat, and I'm trying not to injure him, but trying to get thrown on the mat. But then he would keep trying to throw me off. So even that bit looked shit. Even the bit that like where I thought, oh, he's actually quite good. He's you know, really strong for this age. So he wasn't like complete bullshit. You know what I mean? It wasn't just trickery. The guy was an actual martial artist, but he was just old.
Yeah,
you know, that's all there was to it. You know, so I just tried to treat him with respect. Anyway, just to cut to the chase. People are probably a little bit familiar with Zhu Xiaodong, but if they're not, he's that guy. His nickname is Mad Dog, and he's not a great MMA fighter at all, you know. But he goes around like challenging Chinese martial arts masters of Tai Chi to kind of debunk them, because you know there's a sort of mythology about Chinese martial arts that's a little bit hard to comprehend over here. The way that it's tied into the cultural fabric, you know, like it's part of Chinese nationalism. That there's a sort of magic essentially possessed by Chinese martial artists.
Yeah,
and this runs right through the political system. You know, so they have like kind of some powerful allies in the military and government. So anyway, this is very controversial what the guy is doing, which it's completely irrelevant over here. Like over here, you would just say like, oh, it's just in really bad taste for a young MMA fighter or youngish MMA fighter
to beat up an old guy. Yeah,
you wouldn't go around to the local kung fu club and challenge them, because they're not fighters. They're people who are doing kung fu for pleasure, and you know, like it would be entirely distasteful. You know, it would just be considered bullying. But over there, there's something to actually debunk, and so in the wake of this, Ma Baguao's got the footage and he releases it and states that he's had an actual fight with me. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. So I keep getting loads of messages and comments from Chinese people saying like, you know how things translate, but I wish I'd looked at some of them because some of them were hilarious, you know, like, but yeah, it was just complete nonsense. And I'm like, oh, like, I wasn't actually worried that anybody who was in the know would think that like, oh, I'd lost a real fight.
You got beaten up by an old man.
Like, you know, like, I couldn't give a fuck now. Anyway, it doesn't really matter to me what people think.
Yeah.
You know? But nobody was going to believe it. It didn't look good enough to have had been a real fight. So it's probably for the best that it wasn't. But then what it looked like was that I'd somehow been paid to be part of debunking the jiu-jitsu or MMA. Like as if I was on the other side, as if I'd sold out. I'm like, oh, fucking hell, I hadn't thought of that. So, yeah, just ridiculous. But yeah, But
I've seen the footage, and when you look at it, it doesn't look like a real fight at all.
Of course not. But that was initially, that's what bothered me, because I was trying to make it look
thank God it didn't, right?
Yeah, or at least trying to make it look like a good demonstration of technique, if not necessarily a real fight.
Yeah.
But the guy had lived here in Newcastle. This was the weird thing. Yeah, he'd had a kun in Chinatown, you know, which is not really a Chinatown, you know, it's because it's too small of a city. It's a Pan-Asian restaurant street with a pool hall in it. So he'd had this martial arts school there. So he would stand at the monument. Have you been to Monument? So where the nice architecture converges, and you know, he would stand there in his full regalia with his spears and stuff like that, and. The guy who made the film had said, like, oh yeah, he used to challenge people to Vale Tudo fights there. The thing, I thought, well, I knew what he'd done, and it wasn't full contact challenge fights. He never had full contact challenge fights with anyone. What he'd done was like the party piece stunts, you know, where you have 10 people push against and one person resists and things like this, you know, like the tricks, you know, like he was a street performer, but wasn't a fighter, you know? And so I thought like, okay, well, maybe you had a few, you know, like Bruce Lee with his undocumented Hong Kong street fights.
Yeah,
maybe he had been a tough guy when he was a kid, and then he just hadn't moved with the times and started to believe his own hype or whatever. But actually now, I think he's just not well, you know, and he ended up actually challenging somebody, and the fight went through. The first one with Zhu Xiaodong, Xiaodong had been arrested, and I think it turned out his family had called the police and said, don't allow this to happen.
The family of the MMA fighter?
No, the family of Mabagua said like, oh look, he's
gonna get
and this, oh, don't allow this to happen. So the police had come and arrested Zhu Xiaodong.
Wow.
But then he finally did have like a kickboxing fight or something like that against some like amateur hobby guy who's like in his 50s or whatever. But like there's a big difference between a guy who's in his 50s and a guy who's, you know, nearly 70. You know? And he got knocked out really, really badly. And he was still at it. And I started thinking like,
this guy's
like,
crazy.
Yeah, he's not well. Like you'd think like, you know, you see an old boxer, he might be 70 years old, you know, and he might not be able to move like he used to. He might, you know, might have arthritis, but he still looks like he's boxed.
Yep.
You know, like he looks like he could have done it if he could have moved a bit faster or whatever. You're like, he didn't look like a person who'd ever had a fight. You know, I think he was just a pure fantasist. And it was really, really sad. So people kept sending me the video saying like, look, he got, you know, I bet you're glad that he got his comeuppance. And
not really.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I think he's not well, and nobody should have ever let that happen. It's it's a sad thing. It's funny. It's funny what martial arts does to people. It's
a very unique. I wouldn't even say sport, because like it's a very unique whole genre of life where it's so much of it, as you said, is mythologized, and it goes back thousands of years, and a lot of it is heavily built into the culture, and everyone knows about it, but not a lot of people really understand it. And then we have the traditional stuff, and we have the modern stuff that really works, and with MMA and the UFC, it's martial arts a really interesting thing.
Yeah. What was the
Oh yeah, that was just
other
about
thing?
that was just about him. I mean, I've got a few other things on here, stuff like about, and something that you've spoken about quite a bit, and I want to get a little bit more of a take on it, which is longevity, mainly from the going through the experience of someone who has kind of had the opposite, which is you went too hard, too fast, and your body has broken down because of that. In hindsight to that, I mean, what do you do now to try and mitigate some of the damage that is done to the body and some of that aging process through overtraining? Is there a way of training hard enough to be world class without sacrificing longevity?
I mean, in terms of what I do now, I find beer is a very good painkiller. That really takes the edge off. Yeah.
I'm sure it does. Yeah.
I do my best now. But it's I kind of have to accept that I'm physically declining, and I have to compensate through knowledge. You know, and that might be like actually on the mat when I'm actually doing my best to be hands on. But really, I have to accept that what my job is now is not to do things. My job is to know things, you know, and be able to communicate those things. You know, so having a more clear notion of myself as a coach, which is hard in jiu-jitsu. It's very, very difficult because, like, you know, in other sports, other fighting sports, like nobody in their right mind would go, "I cussed the motto. He was shit. I never saw him spar with Tyson once."
Yep.
Like,
you
know,
100%.
Like those guys, you know, we know all of those guys. Like Ray Arcel was not famous because he was a great fighter. He was famous because he was a great boxing brain that could direct things properly. Like that was the coaching role. You know, and you know, of course, we know in all sports there's many examples of very high performers that can't produce the same results with anybody else, you know, or don't desire to. You know, and people who were never any great shakes or never even competed at all, that can get wonderful results with other people. You know. So, you know, we know this in jiu-jitsu and MMA and in all sports. You can find examples of this. But for whatever reason, as a martial artist, you're always required to prove it. You know, which on one hand is good for us, you know, because it keeps us, you know, it keeps us disciplined. You know, like there's a lot of times that I don't feel like training anymore, and I think like, man, I have to do this because I have to keep the respect of the guys. It's not good enough for me to just say do it like this. I have to show you. I have to show you something. And if I want, and because it's such a tactile sport, you know, you can see boxing, you can see Muay Thai.
You have to feel jiu-jitsu.
You have to feel it. You have to feel it. I can't. I mean, there are some things, of course, I can observe and say you should have done this instead of doing that. You know, but when it gets to somebody who's like at a purple belt level or something like this, you know, like it's very hard to perceive why something worked or didn't work. You know, just with your eyes, oftentimes. You know, so that necessity for contact, like I don't feel like I can be completely on the mat side. You know, if I'm like catastrophically injured and I'm just stopwatch holding, it's very hard for me to do anything that's not just generic. Like if I really want to improve an individual, then I need to be able to keep my hands on them. So it is good in that respect, but it's also, it sets like how do you come to terms with the fact that you're required to be a practical master?
Yeah.
Whilst your body declines, it's not realistic. But you just have to hope for. I mean, the problem for me now is that like I'm coming to the end of the generation that had real contact with me when I was still any good.
Yeah.
So I've got like Harry and George, and Harry and George, they respect the things that I say and they value the things that I say. Like I've told those guys, I said, look, oh no, it'll be over a year ago. I said, guys, I've already taught you everything I know. Like you guys are better than me. Like I can't hang with them for more than 5 minutes, and the only way that I give them good training is if they slow down for me and we'll just kind of play the game, and I told them, I said, like, look, guys, like I've taught you everything I know, and you guys have surpassed my ability level. I see sometimes the stuff that they teach, I think, oh God, we were working on that, and he's just done it better than the thing that I showed him. He's added details, he's added layers, which is wonderful. This is like, as a coach, this is your real desire, right? Like almost, not to be insulting, as if I would call them like children, but it's like to be like a father, where you want your children to do better than you. It's the same thing. I want my students to surpass me, and while they're doing this, it gives me so much pleasure. Like that's the best reward. But I've lost the thread of what I was talking about, Dan. Sorry.
No, we're just talking about coaching, longevity.
Yeah.
No, it's what you're talking about is very interesting, and also I must say, talking to you today, you're a very humble guy. And that's just in saying, like, very rarely does someone have the ability to admit, not just to themselves, but to say out loud, I've taught you everything I know, now you're better than me. Do I think that's the case? I think that's probably not the case. I think that you probably have a lot of wisdom, knowledge, experience that they won't have yet. But just for you to say that is impressive.
Well, again, it's like saying, I didn't invent something. I just observed what works. Like, I'm not really being humble. I'm just being honest about what I see. This is just what happened. It's but yeah. With Harry and George, at least they have this faith in me, because when we first started training, they were younger and not as strong and athletic as they are. I was more experienced, and like they feel, okay, I believe. I believe they didn't see me when I was in my prime, but Abdul reassured them, said this guy was good when he was in his prime, and so I have this faith. Now guys come in the gym and they go like, that was the guy who stays in his tracksuit and holds the stopwatch in the corner. Like they don't have any reason to have any more faith in me. And why would they take my guidance over the guidance of somebody that they see on YouTube? It's a little bit difficult, like, so once the time comes where I really just can't put it on people anymore, like anybody, even from the beginning, where do you stand? It's very, very hard.
Yeah, and I think when it gets to that point, and I might be wrong, I'm not at that point, but one day I imagine I will be, you rely on the guys that you already have. You rely on guys from that previous generation, guys like Harry, guys like George, who are doing it, who can kick anybody's ass and still have that respect for you. I think there's a transitionary period with coaches, because you're right, in jiu-jitsu especially, we have this thing where basically every coach, with very few exceptions, I mean, the only exception that I can think of in jiu-jitsu is John Danaher, is the only guy who didn't compete. All other jiu-jitsu coaches competed, because there's not enough money in jiu-jitsu to. Why would you coach if you weren't already in love with jiu-jitsu and competing in it to begin with? So basically, all coaches have competed, and there is this expectation when you go, like you said before, my instructor doesn't roll with me, and people go, what? They can't believe it. Oh, get out of there, But you go, oh, my instructor's in his late 50s and he had a professional MMA career, and his body's broken now for whatever reason. I think that maybe we're going to see, as jiu-jitsu gets a bit older, because we're not seeing too many old guys. Jiu-jitsu is a very new sport, especially outside of Brazil, where you can respect someone for purely their knowledge and wisdom and their guidance, not for what they're able to physically do that moment. And I think that will have to come, and I think that will become more culturally understood in jiu-jitsu when we have guys who see that happening, and there's that transition to, I mean, in Brazil, there's a lot of them. We don't have them in the UK really.
Yeah.
In Brazil, there's a lot of guys in their 70s, 80s, masters, red belts, red and black belts, where when you go and learn from them, you do not expect to roll with them and to have them do anything or roll full stop, but they still have that knowledge.
I think what it is a symptom of the fact that jiu-jitsu was promoted based on the idea that you prove it. It's a constant proof, which is the beauty of jiu-jitsu, because it's a completely scientific art.
Yeah.
There's no magic, there's no promise of magic. It's all science, and so like the idea that it's proved constantly, that became like the onus on each individual to prove it, which is what made it strong. But also, if you get to the point where you have that coach that you can't respect because you can get the better of him. So well, you're cutting off the branch you're sitting on. I think like I got like I've got a guy who's come from elite rugby. A guy called Jack Payne. He played for Australia. Like amazing athlete, absolutely amazing. 120 kilos of just raw steel and sex appeal. You wouldn't believe that the 100-meter sprint and the bench press on this guy is just absolutely out of this world.
Yeah,
and you think like, okay, so he's been training jiu-jitsu for like a year. You're like, after 6 months, I can't do nothing. Of course, I can't do anything. You know what I mean? I'm just lucky that I've got a guy who's come from a professional sports background who said, okay, this is the coach. I listen to him. Oh, wow, I did what he said and I got a good result. Yeah. Excellent. A lot of guys will come in and just go like, well, I'm going to see if I can beat you up. Well, I'll beat you up.
Yeah.
There you go. So it's, it's a tricky one. So on one hand, it makes me keep my dedication.
Yeah.
To some extent. The other problem is, I know it's going to end. It's going to end, and how do I adapt? What am I going to do? Do I have to give it up because I can't physically prove it anymore? Well, that would be a tragedy. That would be very sad. It would take away a big part of my life.
And I think it would take away from other people as well if their ignorance to the idea that someone can be your coach without being able to physically defeat you. If that was everyone's mentality, we'd lose a lot of fantastic coaches. Maybe some of the best coaches. Because you imagine, like, you can't get 60 years experience without being too old to do it yourself. So what's it? You get to a point where your experience gets so high, the time you spent in the sport has got so long, but physically you can't do it anymore. So at that point you become irrelevant. I don't think so. I think we need to start looking at it in the other way around, which is the old masters that we have come to expect in traditional martial arts will eventually start to happen in modern martial arts.
But it's part of martial arts mythology. Like the movie has this, right? The
Pai Mei,
yeah. That you
still pluck your eye out.
Exactly. But this because we're simultaneously a martial art, and a sport. This pervades the cultural notions of it. But of course it's a fantasy. So simultaneously with something that's entirely scientific, and we're proud of the fact that it's entirely scientific and proven. But still allow this idea of fantasy to pervade the cultural sphere. It's very, very strange. I wonder why we do that. Because the idea, like, why we're martial art, but boxing is not a martial art. Boxing is a fighting sport, but jiu-jitsu is considered a martial art. Where's the martial element? What is the martial element today? With throwing a hand grenade, setting a timer, aiming a rifle? Like this is martial artistry now. Like why do we persist in calling it martial arts at all? For marketing reasons.
Yeah.
Why is mixed martial arts called mixed martial arts? Because they realized like Vale Tudo and No Holds Barred and all this sort of stuff was marketing badly. It was going to get us banned. So we had to call it mixed martial arts because it has this cultural baggage of respect and honor. It's got fuck all to do with respect and honor. It's just sports. It's just sports.
It is interesting because we have the sports that make up mixed martial arts, which are boxing, not considered a martial art. Thai boxing, wouldn't consider a martial art really. Wrestling, definitely not. Then you have judo, where that is the one, and we're just a child of judo, as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a child of judo. So I think we have a lot of similarities there. Judo is that mix where it's a sport, but it comes from a traditional martial art background. So you have that combination of the expectation of lineage and respect and the traits of it, whilst also having the sport ability. I feel like jiu-jitsu is very similar.
So, I mean, well, because it's the Japanese method, of course, has like a lot of cultural baggage attached to it. And hence the virtues of Bushido and all of this kind of stuff. But then that's filtered through a Brazilian lens. That's filtered through a Brazilian lens with a different cultural perspective. So it borrows little pieces, hit and miss. It's very, very odd. Where in terms of just a sport, you could quite accurately refer to judo as Japanese jacket wrestling. Is what it is. But it has this cultural baggage attached to it. Same thing with Thai boxing. Thai boxing you couldn't really consider a martial art, largely because it's from Asia. And so it has notions of like Thai spirituality and all this sort of stuff attached to it. And then when you actually figure out what it's about, you go, oh fucking hell, God, it's mostly about child exploitation, isn't it? It's really, it's really sad when it hits you what it really is. I got a friend who, Pete Teox. I don't know, you might remember Pete Teox. He was the cage rage champion. He was an amazing fighter. But his real passion was Thai boxing. Well, actually, his real passion is academia, but he was just happened to be amazing at Thai boxing. He fought at Lumpini Stadium and stuff. And I was asking about, like the ceiling in the ring and the Y crew and all this sort of stuff. There's it's supposedly like the you seal the ring to protect it from spirits that would enter the ring and jeopardize the life of the boxer. And then the Y crew is to show respect and honor for your teacher and all this kind of stuff. So he said, right, there's no warm-up area, so you need to have a stretch out. And then while you're doing the stretch out, like, it gives the gamblers the time to assess who's got the best poise. If you've never seen any of the fighters before, you see a move, you get an idea who's going to have the better dexterity. The second thing that it does is allows the boxer to find out where the wet patches and the buckles in the ring are, because most of the rings are kind of old and damaged and stuff like that, so they've got like bad patches on them, and then they spill water out, so you need to figure out when you stamp in the opponent's corner, you find out how wet the canvas is, and when you seal the ring in, you test how much give there is on the rope. So in case you lay back on the ropes and it's a loose rope and you throw yourself over the top. Just all this kind of stuff. Like the
it's all practical.
Yeah, there's a practical function to all of it. And oftentimes in modern shows, they just go like, we need to get all of these bouts done. So just get in and get out. So that, all of these things are just I think it's very attractive when you look at like an Eastern martial art and you want to imbue it with this Oriental mysticism. So it's just sports, and everything is just gamesmanship.
Interesting. Pete, we've gone over 2 hours. Did you have anywhere that you need to be?
No, I'm okay.
It's 1:15. We can talk for a few minutes of this. The camera's already run out of memory, but we're going to plow on anyway. I mean, not too much more. I mean, we've, like I said, over 2 hours. I just wanted to kind of finally, because we touched on it earlier, and I think this is where you will have sort of the most interesting perspective, and maybe the last thing we chat about. But sort of, you've been in mixed martial arts from the beginning in the UK. We've seen such a change, not just in the UK but worldwide. I just want to know your thoughts on modern MMA as we see it today.
Yeah, I think I probably already come across clear that I'm quite cynical, and I want to. Then if people hear me talk, they'll go, "Why do you still do this? Like, why are you still in the game when all you have is negative things to say about it?" So I must love it. I must love it because I can't give it up. But in terms of mixed martial arts, we've been promised for ages that it's the fastest growing sport. How many years did we hear that it's the fastest growing sport?
Is it not?
Well, yeah. it could be, but it's in the context of there being no other new sports.
Yeah.
Well, it is the fastest growing sport because it's the only new one. Every other sport is already established, right? Or the ones that people are, paying to watch. So, and then when you look at like, what's the actual earning potential? Not the top guys. What's the earning potential of the average Joe? There's a lot more guys like me than there is Conor McGregor. We just didn't get a nut out of it. And I got a lot of other good stuff out of it. And, whilst I say like sometimes I regret not spending my life on something more worthwhile, I did get a lot out of it. But in terms of an actual job, the money is terrible. And it's, the problem is neoliberal capitalism. There's no two ways around it. There's a lot of money in the sport of mixed martial arts, but it's for a select handful of people, and most of them will never put on a pair of gloves in their life. So it's hard for me to recommend it as an occupation. And it's that I'm saying that the problem is neoliberal capitalism. The problem is also the way that the US has had generations and generations of Red Scare propaganda. So you'll get a bunch of athletes every time somebody mentions union. There's a bunch of athletes going, "That's communism. That's communism." Well, and then obviously to the American speaker, communism means Soviet state totalitarianism, not actual communism. That's but there's no differentiation there. So really, like you notice in all other sports, they call the union the Players Association.
Yeah,
you're familiar with the whole thing. Yeah, so they just guarantee a 50% revenue split. And Michael Jordan knew full well that like the rookie out of college doesn't get paid some of Michael Jordan's money. Michael Jordan still gets his. Just the other kid gets his too. So this doesn't work in MMA, because MMA fighters are the perfect shills to be anti-union. Because they are very literally one another's competitors. When you think about like gig economy stuff, like gig economy works perfectly, because it pits the workers against one another. In a contest for this short-term contract. MMA pits them against one another in a literal fist fight. How ideal is it? You couldn't capitalists couldn't dream of a better sport to have people outspoken about being anti-union. And and the guys that have the biggest voices, the guys who've retired and been given company jobs, and it's in their best personal interests, to be anti-forming a union. But for this reason, MMA fighters are never going to get paid. A handful of them will. A handful of them make it, and they'll make sure everybody else stays poor. And, you hear this all the time, the Hagler quote, "It's hard to get up and do your road work in the morning, when you're getting out of silk sheets."
Yeah.
So, was it 5 a.m. when you're in silk sheets? Yeah. It's impossible to get out of bed in the morning and do your road work if you don't have a house. The idea of keeping a fighter hungry, this is a metaphor. This is a metaphor for ambition, not physically starving, not unable to live. You think, and if you love fighting, you want athletes to do better, because I want the best athletes. You think like no disrespect to Cyril Gane. I like the guy as a personality, and I think he's a good fighter. But how did he get the rematch for the title? How many MMA fights has he had? He had a good kickboxing career, but he had a handful of MMA fights, already lost in a title bid. Just got one over on Tai Tuivasa to get him back in the win column, and then straight back into a title fight, against the guy who'd never had a fight in that division before and who'd been out of the ring for however many years. Why are there no good heavyweights? Why? Well, because if you're a good heavyweight athlete,
You're boxing.
You're gonna go boxing, yeah.
Or if you're a good heavyweight athlete, you're doing basketball, you're doing NFL.
Or you go the NFL. What? Yeah. You could play one season in the NFL and retire a millionaire, or you could fight 10 years in the UFC and never make a month of that guy's wages. If you're a big guy in the USA, you're gonna look at NFL first.
Yeah.
If that ain't working out for you, boxing. We think what Dillian White got $3 million on the same weekend for being on the losing side of a world heavyweight title fight, and Francis Ngannou got 500,000. I'm making up the numbers here.
Yeah.
It's something, but it was radically different for being the winner. You're like, why? Because the revenue of these events was radically different. I said, no, this is not the reason. It's because we have a entirely exploitative system, because we're not covered by the Ali Act. We're not covered by anything over here. I mean, we're not even legal, are we? We're just not illegal.
Yeah,
it's just not criminal.
There's a lot of talk at the moment about unionizing with the UFC fighters, right? This is something that we've only heard in the last couple of years.
Nobody's going to talk about it publicly, because as soon as you do, it's like working for Amazon. Like, as soon as they catch you talking about unionization,
you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's you gone. So, and there, there's a lot of heavily anti-socialist sentiment, amongst fighters, because it is an explicitly right-wing sport. The UFC is like
Donald Trump was in the audience on the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Donald Trump's there. Jorge Masvidal starts the "Let's Go Brandon" chant. You know what "Let's Go Brandon" chant means?
That was That's it.
It's a synonym for "fuck Joe Biden." It's a stand-in for "fuck Joe Biden," rather, because of some odd broadcast in NASCAR or something.
Yeah, which was a weird way to give a retirement speech.
It was, yeah. You think but George Masvidal's not a fool. So he's realized, okay, this is my last chance to get on this, to
jump on that conservative.
That's it, yeah. So I'm going to solidify myself as a conservative spokesperson, as a Republican, and so he's known precisely what he's doing. It's the sport is like explicitly right wing and explicitly anti-union, and I can't really see how it's going to change. One of the problems with that is, my friend pointed out the other day when I was lamenting this, like, a lot of them, they're like the ghosts in The Sixth Sense. They don't know they're right wing, so it's very, very difficult to argue against. But it's a sport that lends itself perfectly to right wing politics, and that ties back into we're never going to get a union. I can't envisage it, and it's a tragedy, because then we could have like people making good livings and would get better athletes, so we'd get better fights. Imagine how good the fights would be if the guy who was fighting for the world heavyweight title wasn't also doing another job at the same time. Madness. Stipe Miocic is still a fireman, isn't he? Because if he quits his job as a fireman, which he probably could, but he wouldn't have a pension.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's a guy who made it, right?
Yeah, and I think people and people over here, like, we still have the NHS. Like fighters over here, you break a leg, you break a hand, you go to the hospital and you get seen. You think, okay, yeah, I got paid enough today. Imagine if you had a US style medical bill. How much money would you have lost on that fight? Yeah.
Well, that's something they brought in relatively recently, which was the UFC healthcare stuff. Prior to that, they kind of were.
It was discretionary.
Yeah.
It depends on how they see that person's future. Whether they think it's worth paying for it, not whether they morally should pay for it. But there's a lot of smaller shows over here that even by the time that somebody gets to the UFC, that they could be getting healthcare. But once the NHS is gone, a lot of guys, think that's another thing to weigh in is, like, can I dare to risk this? Because can I afford to go? I went to hospital after, God, I don't know how many, most of my fights, I needed some stitches, at least. So I think, like, Christ, how much money would I have lost on my career if I'd had a US style medical bill? I dread to think.
Yeah, it wouldn't be worth it, would it?
No. It was barely worth it when I could get free healthcare. Yeah.
And then final question I want to ask, just because you are so experienced in coaching, you've had a lot of guys come through and you've trained a lot of champions up. What is the it factor with a fighter? What is a guy that you see early on that because there's something about some guys where you just know that they're going to make it. In your experience, what is that?
That's why it's an X factor, isn't it? It's very hard to articulate. It's very hard to put your finger on. Talent is not the marker. I think you'll hear a lot of people say this. A lot of the most talented players that have ever walked through the door, people who are very promising early on, oftentimes are front runners. Because they're used to excelling in sports. They probably played football at school and they were the captain of the team, and then they didn't get picked for the for the county team or whatever. They got, fuck, I'm going to do something else, and then they start excelling at the next sport, and so on and so on. I had a bunch of guys like this, you know. You think like, oh, cool, got a world beater here, and then they don't. It's not even the discipline to train necessarily. It's just that they expect to get results and they can't cope with it very well when they don't. You know, oftentimes, this is very general. For me, it's the obsession. You know? But again, this is what I relate to. You know, that I can't relate to people who aren't fanatical. You know? And so I want to see an obsession. You know, this is what I can relate to personally. I think like the guys that I saw this with was Harry and George. You know, like I organised an event, just an amateur event, and Harry fought one of my fighters, and like my fighter he was a good kid. You know, like he was a jiu-jitsu blue belt, handy Thai boxer. You know, like should have beaten anybody at that level, that weight. And Harry came in and just was all over him. I couldn't believe it. Like I had so much faith in my guy. You know, it wasn't a mismatch. You know, like the things were fair, but like this kid was good. My kid was good. Like I really believed in him. You know, and then Harry totally spoiled him. You know, I was just all over him. Fucking Abdul standing in the opposite. He's in the opposite corner, and he goes, "Hey Peter, he's smashing your boy." Ha ha. I was like, Abdul, you bastard. I'm trying not to laugh because my kid's getting punched on the ground and Abdul's making me giggle. I feel like he's going to think I'm a right bastard. Yeah. You know, well, yeah. Harry I thought, this kid's special. It was just something about the way that he moved, you know, and the way that he talked. I thought, I know he's got it. And George had fought like some like a skills bout, exhibition bout, on the same thing. And like George was the same then as he is now. You know, like he's basically doing the same thing. He just got better and better and better. But he'd already established that blueprint for the kind of fighter he was. But like Abdul called me up because they had another jiu-jitsu coach, but this guy had the opportunity to open his own gym, and it was really nice, good opportunity and all that. So it meant he had to leave. So Abdul phones me up and goes, "Right, okay, you're going to come and coach jiu-jitsu at mine." I was like, "Oh, Abdul, mate, I haven't got time, you know." He was like, "Yeah, right, I'll see you on Tuesday then." Like you don't say no to Abdul Mohammed, right? It's impossible. So, I guess I'll see you then. I just got told, you know. But really, the reason why I went and the reason why I stayed was because I got the chance to work with Harry and George, you know. And I thought like, these are guys that really, really could be something, you know. I just like them, you know. It's been, you know, obviously I've let on that I'm a little bit jaded and a little bit cynical. But I think it must have been George who was fighting at Bellator in Dublin. And Bellator put on the song Zombie, which, you know, obviously in Dublin, this is like the house just went wild.
Yeah.
You know, and so like the cameras are panning around to the crowd as everybody's jumping up and singing the song. And Harry starts videoing like how special this moment is with the crowd. And I was like, oh, Harry, it's just bullshit. They're going to dub over it and they're going to make it look as if the reaction to the Cranberries was the reaction to a fight. You know, like it's just a marketing thing. You know, it's bullshit. And Harry says, this is really happening though, right now. That doesn't matter. This is really happening. I was like, do you know what it is? This is why I like hanging around with these kids, because like I've forgotten what it's like. Like I have to experience it vicariously. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like I've had those experiences and I can't repeat them anymore. But I can feel a little bit of it coming off them. You know, and it's the same thing with the wins and losses. Like I can't have that experience anymore. And like I never wanted to coach. I just wanted to be a champion, you know. But you can't do that forever, you know. And I still get to have a little bit of that experience with him. And sometimes it's bad, you know, sometimes it's a loss, you know, and I have to go through all that again, you know. But it's better than having no emotion. You know, it's better than having none of that in life. So yeah, I think that's why I really like those guys, yeah. I get to just borrow their enjoyment.
I think that's a beautiful way to finish it. I mean, we just have this, since you mentioned it, are they both fighting next weekend or this weekend?
No, it's just George next
Just George
weekend.
is headlining.
Yeah.
I see you there, mate. Pete, really, thank you very much. We're almost at 2.5 hours.
Okay.
An absolute pleasure chatting to you. I mean, a real pioneer of UK and MMA, especially in the Northeast up here. So a real pleasure to have you on.
It's been great to get to spend a little bit of time with you and get to know you a little bit too.
Absolutely, brother.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Cheers. That is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to find out more or follow Pete, then you can check him out on Instagram. His handle is Newcastle_MMA_BJJ. You can also check out his website, which is mmanewcastle.co.uk. And as always, if you want to follow myself, then you can check me on Instagram. My handle is @raspberry_ape. Or if you want to follow just the podcast, it is @raspberry8 podcast. My website is raspberry8.com. YouTube channel is youtube.com/raspberry8. And as always, if you have enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it. And if you want to go leave a review on whatever you're listening on, then that would be awesome. Thank you very much, guys, for listening, and I will catch you next time. Take it easy.